Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто буде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у свої сторонці, душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer. I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 247 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine here on day 247. And today is not only a big day because of the big news we have coming out of Kherson, but it's the brand new beginning of another week. This green marker, the sole map filled with green markers alone, is the indication that another week has once again passed, and we are now at the dawn of a brand new one. And with each new week comes a whole load of new opportunities for Ukraine, and we can see that once again, they're starting off this one with a bang, with a massive, what appears to be prelude to the offensive, or it's the offensive itself, finally happening in Kherson, and we have loads of news to report on it as well, as I try and turn off my heater and I slam my watch right into the desk. Starting off, the furthest west we can in the Kherson front, we saw that some Ukrainian Marines rained fire on the Russians with some RPG-7s. A pretty interesting video, and so without further ado, here it is. Well, you see they have loads of RPGs, and they're pretty much firing them in volleys, which is wild to see. Good lord. I wonder how effective this really is. We now see them firing more of the RPGs. And what a video. You don't see this kind of stuff being done with RPGs and volley fire. And we now see them all running back to the truck, throwing their RPGs in, climbing in, and getting out of there. And with that, that's the end of that video, but an impressive look at the Ukrainian Marines and some of the crazy tactics that they're starting to come up with now, using them on the battlefield, like firing off RPGs in a volley. This almost seems like, to me, like it's a Civil War line formation and they've been told to fire at will with RPGs. It's really crazy to see, but of course, a huge credit to the Ukrainians who are trying to come up with any way possible to inflict casualties on the Russians and push them back out of these areas. Moving further east, further down the front lines and away from the very brave and very interesting Ukrainian Marines and the strategies that they're pulling off, we can see some Russians that were captured inside of a bush. And of course, I have to ask you all this question. What is better to have? A Russian in one hand or two in the bush? Better yet, I think a good answer to that riddle would be, why not both? And we can see that the Ukrainians pulled that off right here. And we have to mute the music, of course. It's copyrighted, but we can see that as this Ukrainian looks inside this bush, something interesting is about to reveal itself. He begins to walk into the bush, and we can see down here in the middle of the thicket is a Russian soldier. They throw a couple of pats at him to give him a good pat on the back for surrendering, and we can see that the Russian is somewhat dazed and doesn't know what's happening. He also has something in his hand. It looks like a chocolate bar, and it looks like they got one. A little bit easier than one hoped. And of course, what better way to capture a Russian than to catch a confused one in the bush? And I guess that answers the riddle. A Russian in one hand is worth two in the bush because you can get them both without losing the other. With that, we're now going to be moving further on east on the front lines towards the area of Oleksandrivka, where we saw once again that Ukrainian forces were firing on the Russians in this area as well. And real quick, let me unmute this. Oh, that's definitely music. We see them firing off their RPGs, their AKs as well, at the Russians in the distance. And it looks like they're firing into the tree line directly in front of them, which shows that this firefight may be happening over a very small distance. When you see this man filming and firing an AK, that's multitasking 101 right there. And with that, that's the end of the video, but you can also see how cold the weather is in Ukraine right now in this area, because as this man fires off his AK, you can see a load of vapor coming off of the barrel and also the piston of the AK-74, because it's so cold over there that any kind of heat dissipates the water or any kind of moisture and turns it into vapor, which shows you that the weather is getting colder over there, and also the grass is looking somewhat dead, which is showing that it is getting quite cold. With that, we're now going to be moving even further up the front lines, while we have seen a good amount of news here in the western direction of Kherson. Going towards the east, we have seen that the Ukrainians are once again using their M270s and HIMARS to pummel Russian targets behind the lines and to help their offensive on the actual front. Of course, we have to mute it, but we can see the nice, beautiful glare of these HIMARS missiles as they're starting to fly off into the air and hopefully find their targets somewhere downrange. The missiles continue to fly, and each one is hitting a Russian supply base, Russian forces, Russian command, and logistics hubs, and making sure that the Russians will not be able to hold this front line for all too much longer. It's very crazy to see that they fly through the streaks that the other missiles have left behind, and it just illuminates the rest of them. It's kind of eerie looking. But with that, that's the end of that video, and once again, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are keeping up the fire with the MLRSs, and it's another interesting thing to note that these MLRSs, specifically the HIMARS and the M270s, have to be supplied directly from the West. Ukraine has no domestic capability to produce these kinds of missiles, and so they have to have them from the West. And considering that they're still using them to this day, and to a pretty high degree, it does show that the West is continuously supplying the Ukrainians with HIMARS missiles and rockets of all kinds at this point, except for the ATACMS, and the Ukrainians have pretty much an unfettered and uninterrupted supply line, which shows the status of the rest of their supply line as well, considering it's probably the most intensive process to try and supply these HIMARS and M270s to keep them running, and they've been able to ever since they've received them, and so we know that the rest of their supply line, based off of this and making a general assumption, is probably doing quite well as well. Moving even further east, and Matthew, real quick, why did the live chat just disappear?
Not really sure. I see a box that just popped up that says Q&A and says ask something. I was trying to put a poll up.
Huh, it looks like we may have had a problem there. I had to pop up OBS to make sure that we weren't having a little glitch, and I think we are. So, real quick, Matthew, let me go through and see why we're having that glitch. Let's see.
That is interesting. It's apparently a new feature that YouTube has put in, and apparently the button is in the same place the poll was in. Something. I was trying to put a poll up.
Interesting. Let me mute that real quick. And when the I don't understand.
It's a Q&A button.
A Q&A? Bizarre. We're learning new stuff tonight. So.
And sorry, folks, we didn't mean to learn it on the stream, but we didn't know about that until just now.
Yeah, and also if we could. Let's see if we can end that Q&A right there, and I guess we'll see about using those in replacements of the polls sometimes, but that is a really interesting addition. Moving even further on north of the front lines to the area of Chklove, we saw that the Ukrainians are wiping clean the stains that have been left on their land by the Russians, and specifically the Russian tricolor. And so here's a video of them wiping their shoes clean on what is clearly an abhorrent abomination. And of course I have to mute it because everything always has to have music. But we can see a Russian flag right there on the side of an abandoned Russian vehicle. When you see there the V's all along it, the Ukrainians are now holding the Russian flag. We now see them cleaning their shoes on it. A customary cultural tradition in the areas of Ukraine. Whenever these colors are seen on any kind of object, it is a natural instinct of a Ukrainian to start wiping their shoes off on it to make sure that they're clean. We now see the Ukrainians laughing as they continue to clean their shoes on the Russian flag. We now see one of them waving as they put out their... Actually, they didn't put out their cigarette. I was about to say, what a waste. And we can see now that they're holding up the dirty Russian flag, and they're now going to light it on fire to get a little bit of warmth in this cool winter air. And I bet the Russians would love to do the same, but of course, a political commissar would come around and probably put them in a penal battalion if they did something like it. We can now see that this pitiful, poor, sad little Russian flag is going through loads of abuse by these soldiers as they're trying to find the best way to destroy it. You see that they're trying to light it. It looks like their lighters may be having a little bit of an issue, but it does not appear to be deterring the Ukrainians as they're still attempting to burn the flag. Trying to get a little bit of kindling going on there. And looks like they're now going to rip it. Ripping it in two. It looks like they weren't able to catch it on fire. It looks like the lighters weren't able to do the job. Apparently this is made out of some kind of petroleum-based product, which doesn't really burn all too well. But they are still going to destroy the Russian flag the best they can, and it looks like the man is ripping it to shreds.
Wait a minute, a petroleum-based product doesn't burn well?
Well, if it's a plastic kind of product, usually I guess you could say their burning temperature is kind of a little high, and so it's actually a little bit difficult sometimes to burn petroleum-based products like plastic and polymers because you have to get them up to a pretty high heat, and I think that flag was an example of that. I could be wrong, though. Keep that in mind. But with that, it's nice to see that the Ukrainians captured another Russian vehicle and a flag to make sure that they can keep themselves clean, and I thank the Russians greatly for providing the Ukrainians with hygienic supplies with the Russian flag on it, because I'm sure that that's a great morale booster if there ever was one. We're now going to be moving further down the front lines and closer to the Dnipro River Reservoir, where we saw that 2 Russian main battle tanks were also destroyed today on film in the Kherson area. We can see the drone looking down on the Russian tanks. We can see one right there where the crosshair is, and now we cannot see it. It's now become a large crater.
А что летит?
Ну это же Экскалибур пролетел так.
Хуя себе.
Сейчас звук только будет. Пожалуйста, гори, гори.
We can see them watching the tank, a second one, in a different position.
Да, летит.
Of course, they're already on a roll. Let's see if they can go for 2. And they went for 2, and they got it. The second tank has now also been knocked out. And it looks like, by and large, the Russians are now 2 tanks short in this area of the front lines. And it looks like it's going to stay that way permanently unless they bring in some T-62Ms, which aren't really going to be a replacement. And so with that, we're now going to be moving to our last bit of news from the Kherson area, where we saw that Ukrainian artillery hit the Russians dead on, incredibly close to the Dnipro River Reservoir. And so here's the video of that artillery hitting Russian positions. Also, we have to mute it because, once again, copyrighted music. But boom goes the dynamite, or as they say, boom shakalaka, or up in a puff of smoke, another Russian tank destroyed with a pinpoint artillery shot. Wiping that one out, and of course, making sure that Ukraine will have the upper hand in the Kherson area. And so with all of these videos in mind, and showing us the best analysis we can get of what's going on the front lines today, what is the Kherson front looking like specifically? Well, of course, like every other day, it's not looking all too well for the Russians. The Russians are still evacuating collaborators and some citizens from the northern banks of the Dnieper River in Kherson to the southern side, and a decent amount of their armed forces are also moving across the Dnieper River Reservoir as well. It appears that they are keeping some units on the front lines, most likely to try and give a little bit of a buffer zone while the rest of the Russian forces retreat, but things are not looking all too well at all for the Russians, but it is looking quite good for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians already are starting to pick up their activities and actions in this part of the front line near Kherson, and so we might see that the offensive is happening right now, or that it'll be happening soon. We're not entirely sure whether this is the beginning, or if this is just a feint, or something similar. We'll have to wait over the next few days to see how exactly this pans out over the next few days of the war. And so with that in mind, and that great news being said in Kherson, and seeing that the Russians are still getting obliterated down in the area, we're now going to be moving outside of Kherson and into Russia, because one thing that we always see is that the Russians are practically cannon fodder. Specifically, the new troops they're sending in from the partial mobilization. These troops get sent in with little to no training, very little equipment, very little supplies, and they end up getting slaughtered all over the place on the front lines. Radio Free Europe today came out with a crazy funny video of a Russian political officer, or I guess you could say official, coming out and talking to some conscripts and telling them, you guys are not cannon fodder, and they responded in a very interesting way. And so here's the video.
Слово предоставляется главе администрации Арданского района Александру Николаевичу Антипову. Уважаемые мобилизованные, идете все-таки не мясо, а нормальными бойцами, с подготовкой. Родственники.
They don't really sound like they believe that. It sounds like they think they are cannon fodder, and that's great for morale purposes. In case if y'all don't know, it's always important to let your soldiers know that they are absolutely worthless, because then they perform so much better on the front lines.
По любому обращению в администрацию можно обращаться с учетом всех пожеланий, которые нужны дома, или для солдат, которые будут вести подготовку для отправки.
We can now see what appears to be a fairly angry conscript.
Dang, it's a loud beat button.
And I love how he
That
just
killed me.
You know what I love to point out, Matthew, is that this guy is walking forward pissed off and angry, and then what he does, well, he points right at this guy and says, this guy's an invalid.
He's just sitting there like, what did I do?
He just straight up roasts a guy in a similar situation to him. And, oh lord, it of course is chaos as usual. I'm just gonna let the video play unless y'all see it.
Самое главное, это берегите друг друга. Сейчас, пожалуйста, вольно. Сумки можно погрузить в «Газель».
Бушлат старый. Ну, это уже как по приезду дали, блядь. Ну,
We see another video of a conscript going over their equipment. Of course, most of it's Soviet vintage.
плащ-палатка. Советская, нахуй.
That is literally Soviet vintage. In fact, I think we will not get into any copyright trouble here. This is a, I guess you could say, Soviet-era raincoat. In case if y'all have never seen the movie Enemy at the Gates, Enemy at the Gates...
And also, real quick, Enforcer, everybody in the live chat saying that the guy had a cane that he pointed to.
Yes, he did, but still, that is kind of a little crazy to just point at someone and say, he's an invalid. Like, you know, that's still pretty nuts, but I did see that. So, real quick, now, Matthew, I gotta ask you this, alright? This is a picture of the sniper from the movie Enemy at the Gates, Vasily Zaitsev. Or here's a larger and better picture of him, and there's the raincoat that he is wearing, or I guess you could call it a cape, whichever one you prefer. And notice how it looks, and then look at the coat that this man has been given in 2022, and this guy in this movie is representing a Soviet sniper from 1942. That's not really a good look to get a raincoat like that in 2022, is it?
I would say not.
I would agree. This is 80 years in the future, and the raincoats look the exact same. And so with that, we're going to let the video continue.
Вещь мешок, блядь. Шапка. Хер знает какого года, блядь, вообще, нахуй. Какой? 82-й год, нахуй.
Now when you see once again the old video of the Russians pretending to work.
Вот такая у нас идет боевая подготовка перед отправкой, блядь, на фронт. Вот. Интересно, чего мы туда едем? Копать? Или траву косить? Или защищать родину?
I can't get over that stupid video. Like, it's just such... Like, I don't know, man. For some reason, this looks like the most depressing thing. This honestly looks like medieval peasants toiling in the field. Like, this whole video.
It does, really.
Like, it's almost like someone's about to come by and say, the leisure class, you all to join in the war. You know, something like that. It's just sad looking. And the sky's all overcast. There's just these people just muddling on out in the distance. And more people in the distance beyond them doing the same thing. It is just sad.
России. Или защищать родину.
I mean, I know everyone, I guess I know some people are going to be saying this. We have seen this video before, but considering that it did show up in this video made by Radio Free Europe again, it's still hilarious to go back and look at this and just laugh at what it looks like.
Нам дали калаши и шпик-ножи, блядь. И, ребята, копошитесь как хотите, блядь.
And look at these guys! Where the hell did they come from? Like, look at their uniforms. This man looks like he's about to be singing that song in Serbia with the accordion. Like, what in the world is going on here?
Никакой информации нету, командования нету.
This guy looks like he's from the... Hang on, Matthew. You remember that specific episode of Chernobyl, the miniseries from HBO, where the episode covered them going around and shooting the dogs? You remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yes. This man right here, the one I'm circling with my mouse cursor, he's dressed up just like that. Let me go find that one. Chernobyl...
That was such a sad scene, too, just like, by the way.
Dog episode. Let me go see, and let me go put this up on another screen real quick so I can find the exact image. Okay, yes, this is it. Hang on. Okay, here we go. All right. The Afghanistan-era Soviet uniform. Isn't it crazy and uncanny how similar that looks? And once again, I gotta say this, every single time we're pulling up these examples, these are films. Enemy at the Gates was made in 2002. The HBO miniseries, I believe, was either made in 2020 or 2021. And they're recreations of Soviet uniforms from times long gone at the point these films were made. And so they're using entirely reproduction or surplus bought uniforms to portray these scenes in these shows. And somehow this man, who is portraying a Russian liquidator, a Soviet liquidator during the times of Chernobyl in 1985, filmed in 2021 or 2020, looks just like this guy in a real war. I gotta tell you, that's not a good look. You can't get beyond how pitiful of a look that is. So with that, we're gonna let the video continue.
Как на иголках, потому что не знаем, где свои, где чужие. Ни рации, ни патронов, ни хера нету.
Стоим на передке, блядь. Все наше обеспечение. Патронов нет, гранат толком нет, жрачки нет, воды нет.
Ooh, that's not good. That's not good when a spokesperson acknowledges that there's an equipment shortage. And I bet that gives a lot of wives a lot of confidence that their husbands are going to be sent to war and come back alive, knowing that they don't even have enough equipment for the spokesperson from the central government to say, yeah, they'll be fine. We'll have at least the bare minimum of equipment. They are saying, officially, from the Russian government, yeah, we don't really have enough equipment, but they're still going over.
And the last card said that Putin acknowledged they only get 10 to 15 days of training. I thought they would keep that quiet.
Wait a minute, hang on. Oh my god.
Is that actually a real acknowledgement?
Hang on, we need to do some research on that right now. Vladimir Putin on conscript training. Considering it's coming from Radio Free Europe, I don't doubt it. But let's see here. Let's see, the Daily Beast. That's an interesting title for a news network. But unfortunately, I don't think I can find a news clip or a video clip showing that entirely to be true. But considering that Radio Free Europe did state it, and so far we have no reason to doubt anything that Radio Free Europe puts out because they've been entirely truthful and accurate with everything they've done before, if Putin came out and said that, that is the most damning thing against any of the conscripts that have been put out so far, because, just in case y'all don't know, average Russian training time, just to give y'all a comparison, how long is Russian military training? Under Russian law, conscripts can't be sent to combat unless they have at least 4 months of training. That is around 120 days worth of training at the minimum. They're being sent off with 10 to 25 days of training. Do you know how long that is? That's like 2 weeks of training. This channel has been running so long. Let me actually divide that up real quick. 247 days divided by 7. So we've been running for about 35 weeks at this point. and then we divide that by 2. At this point, we could have, as long as this channel has been covering this war, we could have pumped out almost 18 batches of Russian conscripts with that kind of training cycle. That is how bad it's gotten for the Russians, and those soldiers are practically useless. They're worse than armed citizenry in the early 1800s. They're not going to impact anything on the front line. They are being sent there explicitly for the purpose to die. That is the literal definition of cannon fodder when you have that little training. Well, that's the end of the video, of course, courtesy to Radio Free Europe that provided it. And that doesn't look good. I don't know about y'all, but I think that there's going to be a whole lot of ineffective Russian soldiers that are going to be making it to the front lines, and they are already at the front lines as we speak, and even more of them are on the way right now. And with those kinds of soldiers holding the majority of the front lines, there is no way that the Russians could hold on to any amount of ground. It's a great thing to know, but still bittersweet on one end, because we know that the Russians, with how irresponsible, corrupt, and incompetent they are on the government level, are sending hundreds of thousands, probably, of Russian citizens, who may not have really had an invested stake in this war, to die for nothing. These men are making it there, and they're going up against a well-trained, well-equipped Ukrainian military, practicing Western doctrines and being trained by some of the best nations on earth, like the British. And they're now returning to Ukraine, and they're going up against soldiers that may as well have the training equivalent of a medieval peasant. It's not going to turn out well for these Russians, and I cannot believe that the Russian public knows this information and is standing by and letting their own citizens go to die in a war where we can clearly see now that the Russian government doesn't even care for these people, or how they'll end up, or how they'll turn out once they get there. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia, and from that bombshell news showing how poor it's gotten for the Russian conscripts, and we're now going to be moving back into Ukraine to cover our location unknowns. And starting off, we have a really interesting video of the Ukrainian artillery at work, accompanied by some drones. But before we get to that, I've seen that we have some very interesting polls, and probably one of the most unanimous ones I've ever seen. And so with that, let's hear about that poll, Matthew.
Right, so we actually have 2 to go over for our first question segment. And the first question was, what do you think about the threat of Russia shooting down Western satellites? It looks like 66% said it's just more talk, 12% said I don't know, and 23% said it's a real threat. Now, for me, I would have to tend to agree with the majority. I don't think it's a real threat. I think it's just more talk by Putin, like he's been doing forever. But Enforcer, what do you think?
It's just puffery and just lame idle talk. The Russians can't even operate their own space agency right now called Roscosmos, which I'll pull up for y'all real quick. This is the private space company that operates most of Russia's, I guess you could say, space programs that they've been operating over previous years. And in fact, Roscosmos, after the decommissioning of the space shuttle, was one of the primary companies that sent American astronauts to the International Space Station. Due to the crippling sanctions, practically an embargo that's been inflicted on the Russians since the beginning of the war, Roscosmos has had to stop their operations practically entirely. They've not been able to launch hardly any rockets whatsoever into space, to the International Space Station or wherever, and for that reason, these threats may as well be idle talk, unless if they were to go and do something exorbitantly expensive, which would be to convert an intercontinental ballistic missile or a similar sized rocket or missile to be able to launch directly into space and try and hit a satellite, which would be incredibly difficult to do from the start. There's really no way that they can do that. It's all idle talk. It's very similar to the very beginning of the war when Roscosmos threatened the world that they would personally take down the International Space Station, and then just weeks later they were begging NASA to give them any kinds of parts and equipment they had because they weren't able to get any due to the sanctions. I don't believe at all in Russian threats anymore. Russian threats may as well be as hollow as they come, especially if it has anything to do to pertain with something that requires resources or money. Because one thing that the Russians do not have is neither the resources nor the money to follow through on any of these threats. And so for that reason, I believe it's all idle talk and it's not serious whatsoever. On top of that, considering that that is a U.S. military satellite that they're threatening to take down, doesn't everyone think that if they were to attack a multi-million dollar, probably dozens of millions of dollars put into a satellite, and they were to attack just a single one, I believe that would most likely incur a rather swift response from the United States, considering that those things are of national importance. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Also, my question is this. If Russia were to hit a Western satellite, would that basically activate Article 5?
That's an interesting question. I know that it would activate a response from the United States in general, but let's see. Article 5 of NATO. And let's go back and let's read Article 5 again, because it's always important. Hang on. Let me put NATO Article 5. NATO Charter Article 5. That should take us to the website. I'm supposing that that is the website that we're looking for, so we want to go and find the organization. Let's see. Let's just type in the NATO Charter, and let's see if we can get the NATO Charter on the website. So let me put that in. There we go. All right, so now we found it. Article 5. Armed attack considered, agree that LSE exercise will, let's see, so Article 6, wait a minute, hang on. Article 6 lays out what counts for an attack. Let's see, for the purpose of Article 5, an armed attack on one or more of the parties is deemed to include an armed attack on the territory of any of the parties in Europe or North America, on the Algerian departments of France, which no longer exist, on the territory of Turkey, or on the islands under the jurisdiction of any parties in the North Atlantic area of the north of the Tropic of Cancer, forces, vessels, or aircraft of any of the parties, when in or over these territories, or any other area in Europe in which occupation forces of any of the parties were stationed on the date when the treaty entered into force, or the Mediterranean Sea, or the North Atlantic area of the Tropic of Cancer. So it appears that according to Article 6, attacking a satellite could not be considered a breach of Article 5, because it's not an aircraft, it's not a vessel, or a force of a military that is over... Well, actually, that really gets into an interesting bit of jurisdiction, because what if the Russians destroyed it while it was orbiting the Earth, and it was, at that time, over continental Europe? Would that count? And that's a lot of gray area. What do you think, Matthew?
Really sure. I'm really busy in the live chat. I gotta say, it's running really fast tonight.
Oh, gotcha. And also, I'm looking at it. It looks like we have a chat rate of 72 chats a minute, so a little bit more than a chat a second. So it is moving pretty quickly. And also, do not let that deter you. Please feel free to talk as much as you like on anything you want in the live chat, as long as it doesn't touch politics. That's one thing that we don't really like to have in this channel, because it detracts from the war. But please feel free to ask any question you like. We answer live chats at the end of the stream, or whenever a live chat is sponsored. So throw in a question, because a lot of people have some very interesting questions. But moving back to this is a very interesting question to have answered. Jet Fusion said it's space law, and I would have to agree with you. It is space law, but does this pertain to Article 5? I could see a lot of arguments going in the direction of it does, pertaining to the satellite orbiting over the North Atlantic area, somewhere over, I guess you could say, NATO territory. But at the same time, I can see arguments for saying it doesn't, and I'm kind of leaning in that direction of it wouldn't invoke Article 5. But it certainly would invoke a response from the United States. That would be like attacking any kind of U.S. asset, wherever it would be. Even if it was, say, an unoccupied oil rig in the middle of international waters, but it was U.S.-owned, and that was attacked, I believe that would most likely invoke a response as well. Although, that is kind of getting into the weeds there, because while I say these things, and it always sounds like there is a certain amount of reliability to those kinds of answers, one thing that everyone always has to remember is that these kinds of decisions and the processes that go behind them as to whether Article 5 would be enacted or not in a situation like this entirely depends on the people who are in charge. And so the sitting president of the United States and thousands, if not countless, tens of thousands of people worldwide who make up NATO, the diplomatic, I guess you could say, envoys that assist these heads of states. These people that we don't really know a lot about have certain kinds of personality traits, certain kinds of mindsets, and certain kinds of predetermined plans in their head if certain things happen, what direction it should go in. And sadly, we cannot predict with complete accuracy what all of these tens of thousands of people would come to agree on. So while we say this, we're not entirely sure. It would depend on what these people and their personalities move them in the direction of deciding. But in my opinion, it's really tough to say whether that would invoke Article 5 or not. And so with that interesting question in mind, I hope a lot of people discuss that one in the live chat, because that is a really interesting one. We are on to the next poll.
All right. And the next poll said, do you think 10 to 25 days of training is sufficient to train military soldiers? To me, the answer is pretty clear, but let's see what the results were. It looks like 91% said no, that is not enough time to do it right. 4% said I don't know, and 5% said yes if the training is effective. Now, here's my thing. No matter how effective of an instructor you have, 10 to 25 days for a new soldier that has never picked up a rifle or anything in their life, that is too short. I can tell you right now, that's way too short. But Enforcer, what do you think?
Well, I have to say, Matthew, while we've allowed this poll to run, while we've been answering the other polls, interestingly enough, about another 1,200 people have voted on it from when we started. So it's a highly voted for poll, and it's almost a unanimous answer. 91% of y'all say, no, not enough time to do it right. And I don't know if y'all are geniuses or something. You must all of y'all must have gone to West Point to have that kind of statement, because that's obviously, and of course I'm just kidding there. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to give that kind of answer. It's a very obvious.
Look at Russia though.
Well,
look at Russia. They don't have enough sense to not to send them in like that.
That's true, but then again, all of their rocket scientists are out of the job. Remember what I said about Roscosmos? That's why they don't have an answer to these kinds of simple questions, because all of their, I guess you could say, all of their, I guess you could, well, if you can even call them brighter people, are sitting at home unemployed because of the sanctions. But moving on to that, to answer that poll, it is certainly not enough time to train a soldier to get them on the front lines and have them effective. To think about this real quick. In fact, let's not think about this. Let's pull up some hardcore facts. Training time in the U.S. military. Let's just go for a broad over the entire armed forces. What is the average time? Army basic combat training lasts 9 weeks. 9 weeks. That's nearly 90 to 80 days of training. And that doesn't even count job training, because once you go through basic, you usually go to job training to learn how to operate in your specific task in the U.S. military.
AIT.
Yes. And so that adds a whole bunch of extra time. In fact, I believe job training is usually as long as basic training, if I'm correct, Matthew.
I believe so. I think it might be a little longer depending on the occupation.
So we're looking at a minimum, pretty much, of 18 weeks of training to be considered competent at your job in the U.S. Army. 18 weeks! So let's do the math on that. Each week is 7 days. 7 times 18, that's 126 days of training, and the Russians are getting, at the most, 5 times less than that, and they're considered to be as competent doing something like fighting a war, with 5 times less the amount of training as compared to a U.S. soldier. That in every degree shows that there's no way that these soldiers can be competent. And I know, and I can tell you all this with a great deal of certainty, a lot of Ukrainian soldiers do not have a lot of training either compared to the average U.S. soldier. They probably have at most about 10 weeks of training, including their basic and their job training, if they have job training. But even then, comparing that to 10 to 2 to really 3 weeks of training compared to a Russian soldier, they are leaps and bounds above them even with 10 weeks. And of course, hopefully, optimistically, they're getting a whole 18 weeks of training. A lot of Ukrainian soldiers have been sent to nations like Britain, which will probably send them through the full 9 yards of training. And then those soldiers can be used to train even more Ukrainian soldiers once they arrive back in Ukraine. So there is a lot of room there to improve the Ukrainian military and get them up to speed on Western doctrine 100%. But even if they aren't at that level, 10 to 25 days of training just isn't enough. It's actually interesting to me. Oh, we got a bot. We had a bot.
I just took it. Oh, wait a minute. It got unhidden. Let's see what it got. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Dang, come on, YouTube. We got buggy systems going on here.
Yeah, but to get back to this and talk about this a little bit more, let's compare this to average British Army training time. Because I believe the British train for longer, if I'm correct. Let's see. Oh my god. Since 2001, infantry training for other ranks is undertaken as a single 26-week course. It's 28 weeks for a parachute regiment and the foot guards. Oh my god! That is a lot of training. Let me put that into perspective. 26 times 7. That's 182 days, or almost half a year. And so, during this whole entire time this stream has run, only one batch of British Army soldiers would have made their way out of basic training in the British Army. That's how long it takes to be trained as a British soldier, and based off of the amount of training time they have, the British are probably incredibly competent as a fighting force. And of course, we've seen that historically they are, but imagine, and this is another thing, this is the qualitative side of things that you don't see on a spreadsheet when you compare the Russians versus a nation like Britain, which has a much smaller military on paper, but the average Russian conscript at this point is getting 2 weeks of training versus 26 weeks by the British. A massive amount, and there's no way that they can compare. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, and of course, the answer was unanimous. Anyways, and so with that, we are on to the next poll if we have one, and if not, we're going to answer a couple of questions real quick before we get to that interesting bit of location unknown news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so that was the last poll for now, but up first from our super chats, we have a very generous $100 donation from Panama Floyd, who says, Russian training, raise both hands over your head, sell your Soviet stuff on eBay.
And thank you so much for the support, Panama Floyd. And also, welcome back. It's been a while since I've seen you in here and, of course, supporting this channel. And I thank you so much for the large amount of support. It helps this channel keep on running and helps the lights to keep on in the background, which, of course, is the only way we can keep this thing running. And so thank you so much for that. And also, I love the good joke there. They may have gotten some training from the French. You know, because the French also have done some similar things like that in wars prior. Franco-Prussian War. We're not going to use World War II because that one's overused. But thank you so much once again for the support, Panama Floyd. And also, I love to see that you also know that a lot of Soviet stuff is being sold on eBay. We also showed a website like that on stream before, and it's pretty funny to see how much surplus stuff is just being sold all over the place. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and for being an old guard in the Lee Spring Army.
Yes, indeed. And only if that was a joke. That's actually reality. That's the sad part about it. But anyways, up next, we have a $20 super chat from Super Bonker 9000, of course, the NAFO member, who says, rumor has it that Russians threatened to shut down American satellites tracking their positions in Ukraine. Is it true or false?
From what I can tell, and thank you so
and
much.
also, real quick, Super Bonker said, my question has already been answered because there was a poll on it, so please take a live chat question instead.
Look at it, man, Super Bonker, you were too kind. Because I would go through and re-answer that question again if you wanted, and everyone give a huge thanks to Super Bonker 9000 for being so kind, because we almost all answered that question completely earlier on the poll, and he's decided to now give that to a live chatter. And so with that, thank you so much for supporting this channel, Super Bonker 9000, helping us to keep the thing running, and also handing that over to a live chatter, because I'm sure they would love to have their question answered. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to, let's see here, Happy Dragon, who says, Enforcer and Matthew and anyone else who can answer, how and or why would it be beneficial for Ukraine to use a dirty bomb on its own country?
It wouldn't be beneficial. It wouldn't be beneficial at all. And also, thank you once again, Super Bonker, for sponsoring Happy Dragon, who's also an old guard member of the Lee Spring Army. But to answer that question, it's not beneficial whatsoever. If the Ukrainians nukes, for example, a Kherson with a dirty bomb, and also, we'll go over this in a second, but remind me, Matthew, there's an add-on to this, and I'll try and make it very quick. But to think of the Ukrainians using a dirty bomb in Kherson and wiping out a couple of city blocks in that town for really no good reason, it doesn't add a lot to their situation. It would kill thousands of Ukrainian citizens, which is one thing that we've seen the Ukrainians have avoided like the plague. It would also make them look like international war criminals, which wouldn't really ingratiate them with their Western supporters and suppliers like the United States and the rest of the Western Hemisphere. And so for that, there is no benefit to that. Then that's why it's, of course, Russian propaganda, much like the propaganda at the beginning of the war, that the Ukrainians had biolabs that were being funded by the United States, and they were being used solely for the purpose of producing some kind of a bioweapon to kill Russians only, which that technology doesn't even exist out there. But with that in mind, there is no benefit to that. There is no reason to do anything like that. And also, the additional part I was about to bring up is, where in the world would Ukraine get the refined radioactive material to produce those kinds of weaponry, and how in the world would that go unnoticed? Because Ukraine has nuclear power plants, yes, so they do have enriched nuclear fuel that can be used to run those power plants. But at the same time, how would the world not notice that those power plants are now operating at a reduced capacity, or if the Ukrainians started to order more enriched nuclear fuel, and also considering that one of these power plants, the Enerhodar power plant, which is the largest one in the country, is now in Russian hands, they wouldn't be needing that nuclear fuel for the Enerhodar nuclear power plant. They would be needing less for that reason. And so I believe that if they were creating something like that, it would be noticed. There would be clear telltale signs if they were trying to create a dirty bomb. Creating nuclear weaponry is actually pretty hard to not notice. That's why back in the day, before North Korea did have nuclear weapons, we had a fairly good idea that they had a decently sized nuclear arms program in their country, and they were on I guess you could say the warpath of creating them. And that's the same with Iran, which has become a bit of a discussion and a little bit of controversy here in the United States, is the question of, are the Iranians producing nuclear weapons? And largely from what we've seen, the answer may be yes. So, you know, of course, that's a whole thing on its own that we won't cover too much on this channel. And the Iraqis at the time also appeared to have been trying to create nuclear weapons. Of course, that's also a little bit of controversy, because then we didn't find any enriched uranium when we actually invaded Iraq in 2003 for that reason. But we do know that the Israelis did attack some kind of a uranium enriching plant inside of Iraq that was being constructed, and destroyed it, I believe, during the invasion, if I remember the history correctly. But with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, Happy Dragon. And thank you so much once again, Super Bonker, for donating that to a live chat. Of course, your support helps this channel to keep on running, and your kindness, I'm sure that Happy Dragon appreciated a lot. And that was a really good question, too. So it was a really good handover to a live chat. And so with that, we are on to the last question, and then we're going to be moving on into the next segment of news.
All right, and the last one of the first segment goes to Sylvester the Cat, who puts in a $55 donation and says, "Hello, Matt and Enforcer. I thought the bridges to Kherson were all damaged so that they cannot handle heavy traffic. If so, does that mean the Russians can't withdraw their heavy equipment? Also, I was an M tanker, now I'm a Leaf Spring tanker."
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And also, thank you for throwing in a pretty good question, Sylvester. And of course, you've been around forever. You're a member of the old guard here on this channel. And I can't really remember a time when the stream was running that you weren't here. And so thank you so much for the support, and also being around forever, and also sending kind words our way. And to answer this question, that now that I can read it on my screen, which is nice, I thought the bridges in Kherson were all damaged so that they cannot handle heavy traffic. You are correct in that assumption. The Novikakhovka Dam Bridge, the Railroad Bridge, and the Antonovsky Bridge have all been destroyed due to Ukrainian HIMARS attacks. And so for that reason, from what we know, they do not have the load-bearing ability to carry heavier equipment like a main battle tank. And so that is true. While the Russians are flowing across the Dnieper River south, they cannot bring their heavier equipment with them. Even supply trucks, from what we know, may not be able to cross the bridge because it can't handle the load. And so for that, it seems like if they are withdrawing, they're going to be creating a Dunkirk situation, or they're creating a massive motor pool somewhere in Kherson, and they're then loading all of these tanks individually onto the ferry, and then transporting that ferry across the river one trip at a time to then unload the tanks or the equipment as much as they can, and then get the next set ready. That may be a way that they're trying to circumvent this major issue that they're having. But that is entirely true. They're most likely abandoning a large amount of their equipment as they continue to retreat back across the Dnieper River. And while we haven't seen the frontline changes occur yet, it will be occurring sometime in the near future. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Sylvester Cat, and thank you so much for being a part of our armored brigade here in the Leaf Spring Army. That's really cool. And also, let's run a poll, Matthew. What would the main battle tank of the Leaf Spring Army be? Would it be an M1 Abrams? Would it be a Challenger 2, a Leopard 2 A6, or A7? That depends on you, Matthew, whichever one you find cooler. Or a, well, we'll throw in something new, a Type 10 from Japan. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Sylvester. I hope we answered that question fairly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next segment of news, and moving on to that video I was talking about a little bit earlier, where we saw the Ukrainian artillery at work again. And of course, we're going to have to hop over to Twitter real quick to show this one. But it's a pretty nice video. Once again, showing off our favorite artillery piece, towed artillery piece, that is, the M777. And of course, the bass hits immediately.
That bass was strong.
That was raw. But anyways, again, let the video continue. Mute it now, and we see the artillery is wreaking havoc on the Russian forces. Now, I don't know about you, man. Okay, that editing was pretty sick too. But I don't know about you, Matthew, but seeing 3 Uragons fire their rockets in unison is pretty cool.
Yes, that music's not really my taste, but it would kind of go good with like the visuals here.
1 second, Matthew. I have to unmute this part because that editing right there was kind of funny, and I have to see how that worked with the song. Okay, all right. So now that I know,
it's like a music rap video with like military equipment firing off.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. It's we're gonna let the video continue. We can see that famous video of the 5th tank running into the minefield and getting destroyed. We can now see one of the others getting destroyed. More artillery in action. Stugna or Kornets in action. We can now see them passing a specific truck that I remember before on this channel. We see Ukrainian tanks advancing forward. D-20 firing off. Russian tanks burning. What a video, and I'm sure that the music, if you're into that kind of music, adds a lot to it. Me and Matthew really aren't. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta go back to that one. We've never seen that clip before. Kupinsk. I believe this is Kupinsk Vlosi, or something similar. Let me go check. Let me go check the spelling here. Yes, it is. Right here, it's this Kupyansk. It's the Kupyansk Veslovyi, and that's the video of them standing under the sign that the Russians painted in the Russian tricolor, and now it's going to be repainted into blue and yellow again. We see some Ukrainian tanks racing by, a T-64 BM Bulat, now the hole-in-one bomblet drop. This is pretty much a montage of some of Ukraine's best moments over the past month. We see some grads firing, carnage on the Russian forces, a Panzerhaubitz. We can see the man standing with the Kherson watermelon, a legend. More Russian BMP-2s burning in the street. The Ukrainian firing an AKM, I believe. An Uragan in operation. A Grad in operation. Some 2S1s. Another explosion of a tank. Another tank getting hit. Another tank being destroyed. And another one. And another one. And oh wow, that's a cool video. I've never seen that one before. Also, wait a minute, hang on, what was this? I can't tell what's going on here. It looks like Ukrainian tanks driving backwards, but their turrets were facing the other direction.
I think it might have been a reversed video.
You see the Ukrainians driving down the street. We can see one of those stupid UR-77 meteorites that the Russians have used to commit all kinds of war crimes getting obliterated. And with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that might be a pretty good recruitment video for the armed forces of Ukraine. I don't think they have to advertise right now due to the current situation, but if they did have to, I think that would get a lot of people to sign up. I don't know about y'all, but I would sign up. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and it's pretty nice to see that the Ukrainians have made a rap montage of their successes over the past month. With that, we're now going to be moving into the next clip where we once again see Ukrainian drones at work once again, and we can see how versatile they've become at targeting the Russians, suffice it to say. And so with that, here's the video. Of course, playing some kind of Western shootout music this time. And we now see Russian forces on the move, Ukrainians on the move, more Russians on the move, and we're about to see how they're wiped out by a simple Ukrainian artillery strike. And while it's quite simple, they are quite deadly, as we can see here in this montage. They are knocking out vehicle after vehicle. Toasty. We've seen that one in the last clip. When you see a large artillery barrage landing across the street, we can see the video losing a lot of bits. Do we have any more pixels to offer here? But we can see that out of those pixels, a Russian vehicle did get absolutely destroyed. Moving on to the next clip, we can see more rockets landing in the field, another Russian vehicle getting destroyed, and another one, and another one. I feel like DJ Khaled now, I'm just saying another one. We see more artillery landing and hitting the Russian forces somewhere near the Donetsk airfield. And a pretty solid hit right there at the end, and of course one of the cool outros that the Ukrainians have for every single unit. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of Location Unknown News and on into the next, where we saw a lot of M113s on the move, or if you're a reformist in the Pentagon, you call these things a Gavin. I don't know where that name came from, I don't know why they're called a Gavin by the reformists, but for some reason they are. Here's the video. at him go.
Феєрія мандрів!
That's a lot of M113s. The Ukrainians are almost riding on them like they're on a parade or something, like waving to the crowd all around, throwing out candy. In case of y'all don't know, in Alabama, it's actually quite common for some SWAT teams to have M113s, and so if you ever go to a parade, for some reason, and the SWAT's in it, they're usually sitting on top of an M113 just like this in Alabama, and they're throwing out candy. I've never seen them in use before, and I don't know why SWAT has an M113. And we can see one in Desert 10. That one appears
My
to be...
favorite.
Also, Matthew, this one appears to have a hydraulic lift on the front of it because it's leaning back a little. If you look at the wheelbase, it's not supposed to be like that. But this
I thought
one...
it was naturally like that, personally.
No. If you look at the other ones here, like this one, you can see that it's at a 0-degree angle. The track just follows along the bottom and the top of the road wheels. But on this one, hey, low rider.
Yeah, I'll take the lifted one. It looks like 20 times better than the other one.
Yeah, this one actually looks pretty good. I like the lifted one. And so with that, that's the end of the video. But of course, I got to be honest with you, the M113 isn't the best thing on Earth. You know, it's pretty much the American version of the MTLB at this point. Someone in the Department of Defense went, how do we get rid of the M113s? We got a lot of them, and we can't just get rid of them. So what do we do? And then the war in Ukraine started, and a light bulb went off in their head. They were like, we'll just flood the whole country with M113s. They'll just have 1 million of them. And it looks like the Ukrainians are using them fairly well. And of course, when compared to an MTLB, they may as well be the same. I mean, like in terms of the ability to carry troops, their road speed, all that stuff, fairly similar. And so it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are getting, I guess you could say, a substitute for the MTLB, probably something that they can have a better supply line for. And so with that, that's the end of the video. And really interesting thing to see that many M113s used in the same spot. With that, also, Rick P said it's squatted.
Oh no, no, it's definitely not squatted because you could tell that from a mile away.
Yeah, that's true. That was a pretty funny one. But with that, we are on to the next one. We saw a Ukrainian soldier showing off a VSS sniper. These things are a little rare. They have an internal suppressor built into the gun, and it's something of like a, I guess you could say it was supposed to be like a, trying to think of the name, why in the world can I not think of the name of the
what is it that you're thinking about?
The Spetsnaz. It was supposed to be like a Spetsnaz suppressed small sniper rifle or a battle rifle or something similar while they play the rap. But here's the VSS, and we see Ukrainians got one. Pretty neat. Is it really effective? I don't really know. I haven't heard a lot about these things. They have been around for a while though, but you know, it's just a rifle like any other. I think it uses some kind of odd caliber as well, like a 9x39 or something weird. But with that, we're now moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we see the Ukrainians transporting off a wounded soldier. And yet, while this man is wounded, these guys have the highest morale on Earth. And I have to show you all this one because if there is anything to show that the Ukrainians are in good hands with themselves and they're in their mental state, this is that video. And so here's the video. I cannot play the music. We will get copyrighted, but here they are laughing and joking as they're driving on down the road. And you can see the wounded man down there. He's laughing and smiling too. It's crazy to see how they all handle things so well. Of course, driving down practically a muddy pool of water that's now turned into the road, but gotta say, it's good to know that even when Ukrainian soldiers are wounded, they believe in their cause so much that it doesn't even stop them from smiling, laughing, and joking then. The guy looks like he got hit in the leg or even in the chest as well, and he's just singing like, ha, so Slava Ukraini. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and I love to know that the Ukrainian soldiers are in very good shape. They're in great morale. It looks like even when they get hurt, they feel like there's no reason to worry. And so with that, we are now moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News. And also, Zenith Dawn said it's the pain drugs. It could be morphine. It could be something like that. But still, he is in high morale. With that, we are now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see an amazing video. This one is an incredibly cool one, starting off with an anti-drone gun, which is a really neat thing to see, but it gets even cooler. I'll let y'all see. Would you look at that? It's a Ukrainian Su-24 flying right over their trench. Let's watch that one more time. Is that cool or what?
Для зонтиков, блядь, вот реально поймать его вот так вот?
Now, that is a cool video. Also, you see this guy's got some kind of a little Camonet on him. He's also got an M4. Really cool video all around. All kinds of neat technology on display. And the Su-24s in the Ukrainian Air Force are actually in low numbers pre-war. Let's pull it up real quick and let me show y'all. Ukrainian Air Force. So let's pull up the Ukrainian Air Force. Let's go here, and let's scroll all the way down to where they show us their aircraft. We can see that before this war, their pre-war numbers for Su-24s was 12. They only have 12 of these things, and so seeing one is like seeing a unicorn, and yet we saw a unicorn. Also, they only had 17 Su-25s going into this war as well, and we see them in action a lot. I believe the Su-25 pilots in the Ukrainian Air Force are probably getting more action than anyone else in the entirety of the Air Force, including the Su-27s and the MiG-29s. But then again, we may not just see the videos of them in action. We may just hear about them in action and nothing else, and so for that reason doesn't really get reported a lot. But still, 12 Su-24s, and we got the honor of seeing one of these rare aircraft flying over this exact trench. Let's watch that just one more time. Look at that. It's just so cool. Just look at
Вот для зонтиков, блядь, вот реально поймать его вот так вот?
And with that, that's the end of that video, and once again, a great thing to see. Moving on into our final clip of Location Unknown News, we can see a very rare video, especially in the modern day of this war. It used to be quite common a while ago, but we can see once again that the Russians are now pulling out, I guess you could say, their easy-to-go mobile platform for war crimes, the TOS thermobaric missile, MLRS. This thing fires thermobaric missiles, rockets, they're really more so rockets, at quite a short range, around 7 to 8 miles away from the launcher. These thermobaric weapons are considered war crimes in ways. Of course, every weapon is considered a war crime when used against civilians, but we can see now that after months of silence of these things not being used, the Russians are once again pulling them out and trying to instill terror among the Ukrainian units, but I think this time, like before, it's just not going to work. The Ukrainians have nothing to fear. The only thing they have to fear is the war dragging on maybe just another month longer, but its end is coming. And so with that, here's the video of this TOS in action. You can see it firing off its thermobaric rockets. Also, a real quick little rabbit hole that a lot of people may not know about is that we've seen a very rare instance of the dozer blade being deployed on a T-72 style hull. You usually never see this, and what you're looking at down here, this weird metal shape that's kind of sticking into the ground, is the dozer blade on a T-72. You can see them on practically all T-72s, and I want to show you all this real quick because a lot of y'all may not know that these things even exist, and I didn't really know that these things existed until about 6 months ago, 2 months into the war. These things down here, if you see that, that is a dozer blade, and we can pull this up, T-72B3, dozer blade. And we see here, it deployed on another example of the T-72B3 right there. And these things can be popped down off the bottom of the hull, and they can be used to entrench this tank somewhat well. It won't cover the tracks and where they are, but still, it can dig a little bit of a shallow trench. Western tanks, by and large, do not have these kinds of dozer blades equipped. Of course, if you ever see an M1 Abrams with a dozer blade, it takes up the whole entire front of the tank, and it's quite obvious it's attached. I'll show you all a picture of this here. This is an M1A2 with a dozer blade attached, and there was also some different variants employed on other tanks. For example, this M1, I believe, A1 Abrams that has a different version of the Dozer blade. I don't know the exact names, but I do believe there's only 2 primary variants. This one that looks kind of normal, looks like something you would see on a like a John Deere dozer, or this one, which looks like something out of Mad Max. Unfortunately, I don't know the names of them, though. But it looks like the Russians thought ahead and built in a grave digger for each one of their tanks. And I gotta say, that was very intuitive of them to think so far into the future. With that, let's now watch this video of the toss firing still. We'll get right back to it. We can now see a drone watching these thermobaric rockets hit a tree line downrange. And it's very difficult. In fact, it's almost impossible for infantry to survive thermobaric attacks. Thermobaric attacks like these, the end result of the thermobaric is that when it explodes, it practically liquefies internal organs. And so, of course, death is almost imminent if you're in the proximity of one of these things. It's a horrendous way to die. It's a horrendous thing to think about, that the Russians commonly used these kinds of thermobaric weapons at the beginning of the war during the Battle of Mariupol, which that city didn't even have time to evacuate. There was 500,000 civilians inside of the city of Mariupol being subjected to thermobaric rocket attacks like these, like we just saw in this video. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this clip and our last bit of location unknown news, and we're now going to be moving into the northeastern area where we've had some news to speak of today. Starting off with a very weird clip, and it had a very weird identifier, and, you know, I'm gonna have to ask y'all on this one to bear with me here, because I don't even believe this marker is accurate, but I had to report it where it came from. This was reported to be a Ukrainian ATGM truck that was destroyed in the outskirts of Starobilsk. The current front line for the Ukrainians is right outside Svatove, just about a mile away. This would place the Ukrainian front line almost 40 miles east if this marker is accurate, and that means that Ukrainian forces have already made it to the town of Starobilsk. We don't know if the caption is accurate or correct. That's one thing we have to keep in mind, but another interesting thing is that this was posted by a Russian. We can see right here on the top it says RV, and down here at the bottom it says Rusvezna, which is a Russian reporting agency pretty much. And so it's very odd to see that a Russian clip was reported to be in the outskirts of Starobilsk, because that means that the Ukrainians have done something that is unbelievable, even by American speeds of offensives. That means that over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainians would have had to have liberated Svatove and hundreds of secondary villages on their way to Starobilsk, and also covered an entire nearly 40 miles of ground to make it this far. Is that even possible? By most modern standards, it's not even possible now. Doing this would be on the cutting edge. You would be breaking records to cover that kind of ground in a military, in an actual war. So I don't think this marker is accurate, but let's discuss that in the live chat. Do y'all think this marker is accurate or not? If it is, this is a drastic change to the front line here in the northeast, and it is showing that something is happening that we will get to later. I can't say a lot about it right now, but here's the video of this Ukrainian ATGM being hit by, this Ukrainian pickup truck being hit by an ATGM supposedly outside of Starobilsk. And while this video does show a Ukrainian truck being destroyed, it was such a weird caption that it had to be put on here. There's no way, in my opinion, that the Ukrainians could have made it to Starobilsk at this point. I am, of course, optimistic for the Ukrainians. I wish them the best, and I do think that they will win, but there is no way that they could have made it this far. But we're going to still watch the video, and of course, while this pickup truck will get hit dead on, it is a huge credit to the Ukrainians that Ukrainian forces take casualties like this every day. Of course, not to the degree of the Russians, and take on wounded like they do. And even in the videos where we saw that wounded Ukrainian being carried off in the pickup truck, they still have the highest morale on earth. Nothing can deter the Ukrainians from their goals and their objective of liberating the rest of the country. And even during hits like these, one has to respect the bravery and courage of the Ukrainians to face down the Russians day by day, especially during events like these. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that's the bizarrest marker I've ever seen. And to see it was at Starobilsk was the weirdest thing. So with that, we're not going to be adjusting our front lines based off of that clip yet. We'll have to get a lot more of substantiating information to see whether that was true or not, but we did report it in that area. And also I can see that a lot of people are saying that that is probably not true, and I would most likely have to agree. With that, we're now going to be moving further on down and on to the actual front line as far as we know where it is today, where we can see the town of Pluschanka. And right outside of it, we saw that the Ukrainian artillery destroyed the Russians once again with a dead-on precision. I hope y'all see what I said there, dead on. Here's the video. When you see the Ukrainians lining up the Russian vehicle, the artillery hitting the house right alongside. And we can now see the Russian tank going up in flames. As far as we know, for every loss that the Ukrainians take, the Russians take around 5. And this is one of those 5 that they took for the pickup truck that was lost in the last clip. We now see that Russian armored personnel carrier tank continuing to burn the tree line. And if there were any remaining Russians around, I bet they could use that fire for a little bit of warmth, considering that they were lacking some winter gear, and that may be the closest they'll get to a nice warm fire for the next several months. Oh, we got another bot! Matthew, take it out! Take it out, Matthew.
It's back. The cam bot is back again. It's the second time.
They're back, but we are taking them out with the same efforts that we had at the very beginning of these streams. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the front line and behind the line into an unknown area on the Eastern Front. We don't know exactly where this was, but we did see some Ukrainian MLRSs giving it their all, hitting Russian forces in the distance. And so, here's the video. And with that, that's the end of that clip, but I gotta say, I don't know about y'all, but I think that the Russians are probably not getting the best of this artillery. They may be getting the receiving end, and of course, if there's Ukrainians inside those MLRSs, it kind of narrows down who will be getting hit. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area of the front line, and while we have some very interesting news to report here, and of course showing that the Russians are still taking on casualties, we haven't seen any frontline changes that we can speak of. Of course, this marker near Starobilsk is its own thing, but we don't really know if that's accurate or not. Moving further on down the front line and into the area of Verkno-Kamyanske, we did see an M777 firing at the same time as some jets were firing off their rockets in the distance. A crazy video. So, without further ado, here it is. We see the M777 firing, and then in the distance, the Ukrainian Su-25 also firing off its unguided rockets. Talk about combined arms. With that, that's the end of that video, but a really rare one to see. We've never seen ground artillery and also the aircraft firing off, I guess you could say their artillery support at the same time in the same place. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Verkno-Kamyansk news, and we've also not heard of any major grounds being taken in this area as well. It appears that the front line is stagnant here once again. We're now going to be moving down to Soledar, where we've seen that the 93rd, the famous Fighting 93rd, is back at it again, defending the outskirts of Bakhmut and Soledar. But before we get to that news, I've seen that Matthew has thrown up some more interesting polls, and I want to see about addressing what everyone's voted on there. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and for the second to last question segment of the stream, we have 2 more polls to address. And the first one said, which tank should be the main battle tank of the LSA? This is the poll that was inspired by the Enforcer's words earlier. And it looks like 62% said M1 Abrams, 23% said Leopard 2 A6, 9% said Challenger 2, and 6% said Japanese Type 10. Now, Enforcer, I'm going to assume that our audience isn't as biased as I thought, but we have a lot of Americans watching, and it looks like the Abrams was the winner.
Well, interestingly enough, statistically, our viewership is only 50% American. So that means that there are some international viewers. Around 12% of our international viewers voted in favor of a tank that isn't even from their home country, which is very interesting to see. And also, it's really crazy to see that 6% of y'all, considering that Japanese viewers make up a very small percentage of our viewer base, voted for the Type 10. And in case y'all don't know about that one, the Type 10 is one of the newer tanks out there in the world. It is pretty neat. It came as a demand by the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force that they needed a lighter main battle tank that could travel across the entirety of the mainland of Japan. This is because their previous tank, the Type 90, which is a little bit larger and beefier, is so heavy that it's not rated to be transported across the normal Japanese railroads. And also it can't cross normal Japanese bridges due to its weight. So for that reason, they had to come up with a new tank to replace the Type 90 that could be used across the entirety of Japan, and so they created the Type 10. It's a really cool tank, and interestingly enough, it was introduced into service in 2012. So it's only a 10-year-old tank, which in terms of tanks and their technology is quite new. It's interesting to see 6% of y'all voted for that, but of course, the M1A2 wins again for some reason. And of course, it's not just some reason, it's one of the best tanks out there from what we know. And it really looks good as an M1A2 SEP V4. These things look mean. And also, they are, I guess you could say, the most upgraded tank in service. We can see a SEP V3 right here. And does that just scream mean or what?
It does. It really does.
And you can also add a little bit extra onto this by throwing on a little bit of Tusk, which makes them that much cooler. Let me see if I can find y'all a real picture here. That's a digital rendering. Dang, do they not have an M1A2 SEP V4 with the... Here we go. There's an M1A2, or an M1A1, I believe, with the Tusk package on it. Really cool. Also, I love how some of the Tusk packages, it is a little bit different from each Tusk package, but some of them look like Spanish terracotta roofs, which I think is just a really cool look. I don't know about you, Maddie, but what do you think about the Tusk armor?
I don't like the Tusk that much, but I like that that stuff is like the mesh metal they put on along the side of a tank to deter missiles and stuff. I don't know what it's called.
Let me see. Challenger to theater entry standard. I think that this is a good example of that. Why that? Okay, anyways, let me scroll down before I go into that. Here's the Challenger 2 Megatron on display at Bobbington, and you can see some of that mesh grating on the back of the turret.
Yeah, I've seen tanks with that stuff along the entire side of it, and that's what I'm talking about.
I got to try and show you a better picture. Here we go. Well, I mean, that one's a small picture. Dang it, I gotta try and find it. Here we go. Here's the Megatron at the rear. And what a cool name for a tank, Megatron, but you can see more of the grate plating near the rear of the engine bay. Really cool tank.
Yes,
I gotta
yes.
say. Also, I love how the British put this weird. And I hope that some British tankers who are in our live chat right now can explain this. What is this weird table-looking object that's on the rear of the Challenger 2's turret? I've never really found a good answer for that. I believe it's probably some kind of communications relay if I had to go with a logical answer. But in case if it isn't, please let us know what that thing is, because it's on a lot of Challenger 2s, and it looks really weird. But it looks kind of cool in a way. But with that, a very interesting poll result, and of course, because I'm American, I always have to go with the M1A2. I trust it quite heavily, and of course, considering that it seems we've come out with a new upgrade for, I believe it's the XM51, that looks really promising. Maybe it'll even go a little bit further. Well, I believe it's the Abrams X. It'll hopefully get even better. But with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and the next one said, do you think Russian conscripts are being sent into battle with minimal training on purpose? It looks like 84% said yes, they are cannon fodder. 8% said I don't know, and 8% said no, they think the training is just fine. And I would have to tend to agree with the majority for obvious reasons. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I think they're not being sent... that's a tough one to say. Well... No, actually, I don't think they're being sent there on purpose. I think that that's the best that the Russians can do given the current situation. Think of this. We got to think about the context behind this. We already know that the Russian cadre had been killed off in this war. Remember in Kharkiv, Matthew, when Starsky told us that an entire brigade made up of instructors and trainers of the Russian armed forces were just wiped out north of Kharkiv?
Yes.
A lot of the top of their pyramid in terms of experience and training has already been wiped out at this point, so they probably don't even have the infrastructure in terms of experience to really train these conscripts and how to do anything. And so they're like, well, the best we could probably give them is 10 to 25 days of training and then send them up, because keeping them in training for longer and learning nothing won't really benefit us. And so for that reason, I think that it's something of more of like an end result of all of Russia's poor decisions manifesting itself into how long that training is. It's probably not a deliberate decision. It's probably just a decision by mere need, by mere, I guess you could say, the environment that they've created for themselves. In a way, what I'm trying to say is they've made their own bed, now they're going to sleep in it. All of their cadre and instructors have been killed off already, and so now they're just sending them in with no training because there's no one really there to train them anyways. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and if we have any others, I would be interested to hear them. Do we, Matthew?
That was our last poll, so we're now moving into our super chats. But up first, I want to give a shout out to our mods. Also, Susie Halsey over there in the Discord, as well as all of our other mods. I just want to say thank you for your work because PsyOps told us that y'all needed some cheering up. So hopefully this cheers you up. And Enforcer, would you like to call them out yourself?
Yes, I would. I would like to call out all of our moderators, Susie Halsey, Iceland, Carolina, everyone who is on our moderator team. I thank you so much. I wouldn't name you all off, but that would probably take a little bit. Y'all have been incredible over there, and while I don't get to drop by often, because life is quite busy, I do love to talk to y'all whenever we do. Of course, usually it's in a large group call with everyone else. It's always fun. I always love it. And y'all are great folks. And y'all have helped out a lot on the Discord server to keep that thing nice, civil, and tidy. And so, of course, to cheer y'all up, thank y'all so much once again. And everyone, give a huge thanks to all of our Discord mods who've been over there and helping the Discord to keep alive, keep running, and keep everything a-okay. And so with that, I hope y'all enjoyed that little shout out. And also, Susie Halsey pops up in our live chat a lot and is also one of the ones to plug our Discord. And she has asked for me to do that before, and I usually forget because there's so much to cover and so much to do on a stream. But considering that we have this moment, if you have not become a member of our Discord, make sure to do so. The link is in the description below. Discord is an easy system to use. Once you learn it, has very little, I guess you could say, a learning curve to it. It's very easy to use, as much like Twitter or Instagram. You can join our Discord and become a member of the Lee Spring Army. There's a lot of incredible, interesting people who are inside of our Discord with a whole bunch of interesting comments, and they're also really fun to talk to. And so make sure to go join the Discord. Our moderators love to see new people come in, and I also love to see that the Lee Spring Army on Discord continues to grow, and we continue to have a more fleshed out and very interesting community full of really cool people with all kinds of different ideas, experiences, and backgrounds. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into our questions, I believe, and I hope that cheered up our moderators a pretty good bit as well.
All right, and it looks like Susie Halsey's back in the live chat again, so it's good to see you there. She said, "Oh, you're so welcome. Join the Discord, LOL." And she's still on the job. Look at that. Very duty bound. But anyways, moving on to our first super chat, we have a $100 donation from Paul Fitzgerald. And Paul, thank you very much. That is very generous of you. He says, my training in the Marines consisted of 12 weeks OCS, 6 months of basic officer training, and 6 months artillery school before I went to the fleet.
God, wow, oh my God, oh, that's a lot of training. 12 weeks. That's 3 months. Then another 6 months. He went through like a year in 3 months of training. Oh my Lord, that's a lot of like, God, you should have gotten a college degree for that, like a master's or something. Good Lord. And thank you so much for the support, Paul Fitzgerald, and sharing that with us, because that is a lot of training. And of course, there is a joke about the Marine, you know, there's always jokes about the Marines that, you know, like, oh, you know, they know nothing. The Marines are always picking in the worst. But I mean, with that kind of training, there's no way that the Marines can be the worst. And of course, their history shows that the Marines are some of the best fighting units out there. I mean, they've really proved themselves all the way back to the very beginning of the nation's history. In case if anyone didn't know, the Marines did an incredibly good job in the Barbary Wars, or the Barbary Wars against the Barbary pirates in the north of Africa, or Corsairs. You know, anyways, you know, without going through the whole history of North Africa in the early 1800s, they did an incredible job fighting the pirates that were preying on merchant shipping across the North Atlantic, because the United States was not willing to pay them. Oh, wait. Yeah, Matthew, are you okay, real quick, because I want to ask you this, because I know sometimes we run over time. Are you okay with me going down a quick rabbit hole and explaining that short story?
It might take us off track too much, Enforcer.
All right, so with that in mind, sadly, I won't be able to cover that. We may cover that some other time around, maybe in a video. But with that, we are on to not to the next one. Of course, I thank you so much once again, Paul Fitzgerald, for the support and also providing us with that information about how much training the Marine Corps puts some folks through. And that is very assuring to hear that the Marines go through that much training depending on their specific job. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Paul Fitzgerald, and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for viewers like you, this stream would not be possible. Y'all are the only way that we are able to support this thing and keep the lights on in the background, so that way we can report this war day by day as it continues on. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for being an Old Guard member of the Leaf Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $50 super chat from David Tan Creti, who does not leave a comment. But David, thank you very much for the support. I think that's the first time I've ever seen you in the live chat, and if it is, welcome to the Leaf Spring Army.
And welcome to the Leaf Spring Army. You didn't leave a comment. Oh man, you know. And of course, I love to answer questions and address comments when people send in support, because I feel like that's my way to return the thanks for you sending in the support. But sadly, you didn't. But I still thank you so much once again. It helps out this channel a lot, helps this thing to keep on running, and without y'all support, it wouldn't be possible. And so we are always greatly appreciative of everyone who helps to support this channel. But let me say this, because whenever I say that, I think that some people are like, oh man, like I have to support the channel through a super chat to get thanks from the Enforcer. You do not. I'm happy that a lot of y'all are here right now. There's 7,500 of y'all on this stream watching right now, and regardless whether you throw in a super chat or not, I thank each and every one of y'all for watching. Supporting this channel does help us out a lot, but I'm just so proud and so honored to know that a lot of people find the stream worth their time and enjoy listening to the news from here. And so with that, thank you to each and every one of y'all. Y'all don't have to throw in a super chat to get my thanks. I thank every one of y'all. Also, if y'all would hit the like button, that does help out a good bit. And also subscribe. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, David, for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, who does not leave a comment. And BC, if you're still on for the night, I think he said he was getting off, but at the same time, I think sometimes he sticks around anyway. But BC, thank you so much for the support once again. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words?
Yes, I would. I would love to thank you so much for the support, BC. You are an Old Guard member and have supported this channel a lot. And I've got to thank you so much for keeping the fires burning behind the scenes for us to keep this channel running and always supporting this channel. Of course, BC Skyman has a very personal connection to the war, and I thank you so much for always paying attention to the news and helping this channel to keep on running, so that way we can keep reporting on it as well. And so with that, I believe that is the last question of this segment, if I'm correct, Matthew.
I believe so.
All right, and so with that, we're now going to be moving through the final segment of news for the night, starting off in Soledar, where we can see that the Fighting 93rd is in action again. And so here's the video of the Fighting 93rd doing what they do best, fighting. Playing some music as well. We can see what appears to be a BMP-1? I can't really tell you. The barrel was quite long on that one, but we see a lot of Russian armored personnel carriers in that tree line, and the Ukrainians will get them all, most likely, before the end of this video. They've gotten one. They've gotten two. They've gotten three. And it looks like they may have gotten a fourth one right there, as we see white smoke billowing up. And now they're just peppering the whole place with a grad. We can see some fires breaking out on those armored personnel carriers, and I don't think they'll be used anymore. Huge credit to the 93rd, the Fighting 93rd, that has continued to help the Ukrainians to hold the lines in many places and set the standard for what a unit must fight like. These guys, I would say that they're up on the level of Audie Murphy, the Harlem Hellfighters, any unit that you could imagine in U.S. history that has made a name for itself, like the Bucktail Brigade in the Civil War. They are up there with them. They are quite a fighting force and definitely a unit to be reckoned with. I bet you the Russians fear whenever they hear that the 93rd is in their area. With that, we're now going to be moving towards the area of Pokrovsk, where we saw that the Wagner unit had a shell fall quite close to them on video. And so here's the video of the Wagner Group probably going into a special Browning operation. Also, we gotta mute the music. That's from Gladiator, most likely, but we can see as they zoom in the camera, a shell's about to land. Right. Oh, wait, did you see that, Matthew?
Wait, let's see it again.
You can see the shell right there.
Oh, you can.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
You can even see the shockwave a little bit.
Yeah, that was nuts. And so with that, that's the end of that video, but I think that Wagner man just had just turned his multicolored camo into a unicolor brown. With that, we're now going to be moving to Bakhmut, where we saw that the Ukrainians have recaptured an asphalt plant. Actually, it was the Ukrainian police force that recaptured an asphalt plant on the outskirts of the town. And so with that, here's a video of them recapturing a part of Bakhmut that's been in Russian hands for about a month. Also, we have to mute it because it's, of course, playing music. It's a really good song. I forgot the exact name of it, but I have heard it before. We see them showing the asphalt plant that they've now retaken. When you see it's a large montage of the police moving around. Of course, the police have gotten so well armed at this point in the war that they look like normal, regular military forces, but these are just cops. Dun, 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 dun. Bad boys, what you want, what you want.
You said, "Bad boys, what you want, what you want."
Yeah,
what you gonna do?
Yeah, I don't know the song. I don't know the lyrics.
I'm just trolling.
Oh, I know. I'm just kidding around with you too. But still, I don't think you want to run into these cops. If you were speeding in front of them, you might be in a little bit of trouble. You see them getting down for a second. Is that a BTR-4? I think it might be. We now see them playing around on an iPad. This man is playing Minecraft. He's taking a little bit of a break. When he's, oh, what in the world? Volley fire of an AGS? Nuts! That is radical right there. That's I've never seen anything like that. That's insane. Now that's nuts. I've honestly never seen anything like that the whole war. Using 3 AGSs in the same spot, like setting them up like a battery. When you see them firing off some RPGs. We see them now firing their AKs through the woods. Also, thank you, John. I just saw your super chat come in. We will be getting to that later on, and I will make sure to make the story very short now that you've requested it. But with that, I was seeing there, Matthew, actually thinking when that one came in, I was like, man, I wish I could have continued the story about the pirates. But with that here, you can see that the Ukrainians have retaken the asphalt factory, and it looks like they'll be doing quite well in the future. With that in mind, we have not been able to adjust our front lines due to them being inaccurate in this area by a little bit, due to them being based off of video and picture evidence, but one thing I can say is that we can adjust the front line a little bit to include that the Russians are in control of Pokrovsk from what we can tell, but beyond that, the front line is still a little inaccurate and will require some more information to flesh out to become more accurate. With that, we're now moving down the front line towards the area of Avdiivka and Kamyanka, where we saw that Ukrainian forces came under fire and were shelled today in their positions, but of course kept a pretty decent cool about themselves while under fire. Here's the video. See that round landed right near the man. He got down immediately. And it looks like he's wincing a little bit, probably because his ears are ringing from the tinnitus that's caused by these loud explosions. Also, like he may have gotten a splinter of concrete in the side of his arm, but he's handling it like a champ. We hear another round come in. And when you see that he's still what appears to be trying to pick out the chip that's gotten on his shoulder, it literally, that's not even supposed to be a pun, but Still, the man handled it like a champ, and that's the best you can ask. Is that someone deals with it with nerves of steel, and it looks like he did quite a good job when it came to it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and behind the lines, where we can see that help is on the way, as a Ukrainian tractor, once a daunting predator, the top of the food chain in this war when it came to Russian vehicles, is now sitting in its retirement and watching the Ukrainian army pass on by to continue on the fighting and hopefully push the Russians from these lands. And when you see from the inside of the cab of this tractor, Ukrainian forces passing by as they race on their way towards the front lines. Really nice to see, actually. And also it's really cool to see us film from a tractor, of all things. And look at that convoy, Matthew. Look at this thing.
Man, that's a trucking convoy right there.
Yeah, wait a minute. They've got a captured Z tank. Z truck.
Oh, wait, that's the Ukrainians driving those?
Wait a minute, hang on. Hang on, let me go
That
back.
can be, because they're all Zs.
Oh, we've got it wrong.
Oh, they're watching their prey pass by.
They're watching. I thought that it said that. Okay, I'm sorry, everyone. I misread.
It's time for the Attenborough voice.
Yes. So let me see if I can get it down. We're gonna have to rewind this, and real quick, let me give new context to it. I got that entirely wrong a second ago. This is actually a Ukrainian tractor driver in the Donetsk Oblast, or somewhere similar, filming a Russian convoy passing by as it moves its way up towards the front. And so with that, now it's time for me to go and re-change the whole story. These are not Ukrainian forces on their way to the front. These are Russian forces on their way to try and bolster the lines in Donetsk. And so here we can see here we can see the Ukrainian Predator, the still 350 tractor, watching as its prey passes by. Of course, the Russians are completely unaware of the danger that faces them on the other side of this highway. Hopefully that was okay. I can't really tell.
That was good. That was good.
Ah, it wasn't. You're lying. But we can see the Russians.
I'm not a liar.
Wait a minute, hang on. Let me pull out the good line. I'm not a crook.
Yes. That's political, though.
That's not political. But when you
I'm
see...
trolling like crazy tonight. Sorry,
Dude,
folks.
What, is PsyOps taking you over? Are you getting possessed by PsyOps
Yes.
or something?
PsyOps is rubbing off on me a little bit.
And so with that's seeing that video, but we can see that the Russians are moving forward some additional forces. It looks like 2 tanks and a decent amount of supporting trucks to try and help out in that area of the front line. But little do they know, they're being followed closely by the worst predator in the entirety of Ukraine, the Tractor. And so with that, we are now moving on out of the Donetsk region, and we haven't seen any frontline changes as of today, and it largely looks like it's in a stalemate. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down to the southern front, where we saw 2 last bits of news before we get to the Dnipro, which had a very interesting little bit of news to cover today. In Vavorivka, we saw Ukrainian MLRS firing at the Russians. And of course, we don't know if this was in Vavorivka. We just put these markers down in the general area of the southern front, and if for some reason anyone wants to take this as actual hardcore evidence here that they are there, the best of luck, we as they're not. So here's hope y'all enjoy your eardrums being blown out.
You turned the volume up, I can't hear it.
I'm sorry, what was that? I can't hear you over the sound of my faucet turning on. But that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see the Ukrainians are using their air guns down in the southern front and hopefully hitting their targets. With that, we're moving on to the last clip of news from the area near Orikhiv, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able, with swift precision, they were able to overrun a Russian BTR-82 crew and take them. So with that, here's the video. When you see the BTR right there, we can hear a Sasquatch in the distance, as we have to mute the video now, but we see the BTR-82 sitting right there, and the Ukrainians are encircling the thing. The Russian crew apparently doesn't know that they're being trapped. Wait a minute!
What's going on right there?
Wait a minute! That was the crew! Their BTR-82 is right there. They're sleeping under a tarp. And the Ukrainians just literally walked up to him, started kicking him, and put their hands behind their back and pretty much arrested them, and now they're dragging them off.
That man was giving him a walloping right as that camera turned that way.
Well, it looks like they just got a free BTR-82 and took the crew alive. We can see one of them right there. Man, what an idiot. Like, what an idiot. Like, no one is watching and they're sleeping in the middle of broad daylight? What is wrong with these people? We now see the whole three-man crew of the BTR-82 captured, along with their rifles, along with their passports, along with their ammunition. And what a goof. We now see the Ukrainians got another free one in complete running order. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that's probably one of the funniest goofs we've seen, is that the Russians were literally sleeping in the middle of the day and were caught literally lying down on the job. With that, we haven't seen any frontline changes in the Dnipro, well, the Zaporizhia area as of right now, and it appears that there most likely won't be for some while. Moving on up into the Dnipro, however, we did see that there were more suicide drone attacks that caused some damage. We don't know how extensive the damage was, but we could see the fires burning from this car that was driving past the area near this gas station. With that, that's the end of that video, but suicide...
What's that guy doing? That guy right there in the back of the shot. He's just like lurking around the fire.
I think he was walking away from it after inspecting it a little bit up close.
Could that be the Russian chain smoker?
Well, I mean, like, this is in Dnipro behind Ukrainian lines, so I don't think it's the Russian chain smoker per se. But with that, we can see that the merciless Ukrainian, the Russian suicide drone attacks are continuing on Ukrainian infrastructure, and we do not know if there were any civilian casualties in this gas station attack. But with that, we're now going to be moving up from Dnipro and to the speech from President Zelensky. And while many of y'all usually, actually it's most of y'all watch the speech from President Zelensky, but some don't, I highly suggest that you watch tonight, because sitting in front of him in this speech is a partially destroyed Shahed 136 that they were able to shoot down and recover. And so with that, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 247 of the war in Ukraine.
Доброї ночі, воїни світла. Енергійний народ, що завжди заряджений на боротьбу. Завершується її 246-й день. Ми продовжуємо свій спротив. Агресор продовжує свій терор. Нас знову атакують з неба зграя їхнього вороння. За 2 доби випущено понад 30 дронів. Захисники нашого неба не допустили прориву стерв'ятників ворога глиб країни і приземлили 23 шахеда. Крім цього, перетворено на металобрухт керовану авіаційну ракету Х-59, 2 ударних вертольоти К-52 і черговий штурмовик Су-25. Загалом, за цей період Росія здійснила 4,5 тисячі ракетних ударів і понад 8 тисяч авіанальотів. Але ми боремось, будемо збивати більше. Я дякую вартовим нашого неба. Також дякую всім, хто долучився до збору коштів на ловців ось таких шахедів. Лише на платформі United24 це 665 тисяч людей з 70 країн світу. Спільними силами ми неодмінно будемо підрізати крила всім металевим потворам, скільки би і звідки би їх не летіло в напрямку України. Ворожі літаки будуть падати, ворожі вертольоти будуть падати, шахеди будуть падати. Не впаде тільки український народ. Героїчний народ, який точно увійде у світову історію. Власне, як і цей день, він вже історія. На годиннику вже за північ, на календарі вже 28 жовтня. Щороку в цей день ми відзначаємо звільнення України від нацистських окупантів. Ми віддаємо шану українцям, які боролись і перемогли нацизм у роки Другої світової війни. Сьогодні ми робимо це, тримаючи в руках не квіти, а зброю. Сьогодні зберегти пам'ять про подвиги наших предків означає захистити їхні здобутки. Ми згадуємо вигнання нацистів, наближаючи вигнання рашистів. Зло, що, здавалося, у 1945-му було остаточно переможено і спалене дотла, 80 років по тому відроджується з попелу. Стає на ноги, стає можливим. І як це вийшло? Непомітно. І дуже стрімко, як одна доба змінює іншу. Вмить новий день і нове зло наступають вмить, в ту саму мить, коли світ не помічає. Дехто сонний, дехто глибоко спить, хтось не звертає увагу, хтось не надає значення, а загалом всі мовчають. І думають однаково: мене не торкнеться. Війна десь далеко, десь у Придністров'ї – це клопіт молдаван, десь у Абхазії, Осетії – це клопіт грузин, десь у Криму, на Донбасі – це клопіт українців. Нас омине, по нас не прилетить, за нами не прийдуть. На жаль, як наслідок, це стає клопотом всіх. Рано чи пізно спогади про страшну війну стають страшною реальністю. Сусід стає агресором. Агресор стає терористом, а нацизм стає прикладом для наслідування. Він може прийти у новій масці з новими гаслами, але тією ж метою. На жаль, ми знаємо про це не із книжок. Знаємо, як зло може увірватися в твій дім, як у минулому столітті і 8 років та 8 місяців тому. Порушити західні кордони чи прийти з півночі, сходу і анексованого Криму. Обстрілювати мирні міста фугасними бомбами чи крилатими ракетами. Замінувати Дніпро-ГЕС чи захопити Запорізьку АЕС. Скидати бомби попри Червоний Хрест чи надпис «Діти». Красти зерно за хунгер-планом чи створювати загрозу голоду всій планеті. Викрадати і вивозити людей. Викрадати і вивозити дітей. Форма зла стала іншою, але суть залишилась незмінною. Зло завжди починає однаково. Загарбники називають себе визволителями, вторгнення своєї армії самозахистом, як і 80 років тому український народ стає на оборону рідної землі. І ворожий план бліцкригу стає провалом. Зло завжди діє однаково. Вбиває цивільне населення, запевняючи, що б'є лише по військовим об'єктам, влаштовує блокади і фільтраційні табори. І сирець стає Оленівкою. Знищує міста і села, і Корюківка стає Бучею. Але рано чи пізно про військові злочини стає відомо. Реакція світу стає болючою. Політика умиротворення стає жорсткою протидією. Становище зла стає цукцвангом. Тож зло завжди закінчує однаково. Окупант стає капітулянтом. Загарбник – втікачем. Військові злочинці стають підсудними. Агресія – вироком. Руйнування стають репараціями. Ворожа техніка стає музейними експонатами. Подвиги дідусів стають перемогами онуків. День визволення України від нацистів у 247-й день нашої боротьби стає символом. Результатом нашої боротьби неодмінно стає визволення нашої України. Захоплена територія стає вільною. Так завжди було в минулому, так точно буде в майбутньому. У майбутньому Херсону, Донбасу, Луганську, Криму. Бо завжди наша земля стає вільною. Спротив стає гордістю. Боротьба стає перемогою, а Україна стає єдиною. Сьогодні єдиною тактикою Росії став терор. Єдиним можливим фіналом такої тактики стане поразка. Терор став доказом їхньої слабкості і тестом для нашої стійкості. Нас не зламають обстріли. Страшніше ворожих ракет у нашому небі почути ворожий гімн на нашій землі. Нас не злякає темрява. Найтемніші часи для нас не без світла, а без волі. Наші військові міцні, волонтери невтомні, партнери надійні, а люди незламні. Друга армія світу буде все меншою. Втрати ворога стануть дедалі більшими. Я впевнений, ворожа пропаганда не працює, провокації не діють, погрози не лякають. Не злякає нас і будь-яка важка зима. Ми знаємо, що найтемніша ніч стає світанком. Ми знаємо, що всі окупанти тікають з нашої землі однаково. Гауляйтери і самопризначені губернатори закінчують однаково. Рейхскомісаріати і квазі-республіки помирають однаково. І в усіх наших містах обов'язково будуть наші прапори, і юнкерси, і дрони камікадзе падають однаково. І у нашому небі обов'язково будуть наші птахи, наша блакить, наша мрія. Слава всім, хто боровся з нацизмом у роки Другої світової війни. Слава всім, хто б'ється за Україну сьогодні. Слава нашому народу, який увійде в історію. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky, and that rounds out day 247 of the news of the war in Ukraine. Quite a poetic and very well-made speech tonight to round out tonight's stream. And of course, if you did enjoy all of the news that we've covered and everything that we've done so far on this stream, please make sure to hit the like button. Also make sure to subscribe and comment in the comment section below this video once the stream is over. All of those things help this channel to keep on running and help us to grow the Lee Spring Army. The plan is still in effect here in the near future to begin an aggressive social media campaign. We will be stretching out not only from YouTube, but to Twitter, to Instagram, to Facebook, and everywhere else to try and let it be known what the Lee Spring Army is, what we do, and hopefully in the future be able to reach the $100,000 fundraiser. We'll also be, just in case if you all do not know, this is kind of outlining the entire plan, we'll also be trying to get onto news networks to speak about this channel, most likely local ones here in our state, to spread the, I guess you could say the knowledge that our channel does exist and what we do here on this channel each and every week with the Sunday fundraiser. And so with that, I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight's stream. Hopefully, much like the darkest night before the dawn, we will be reaching our dawn and a new golden age with the support we've been able to raise for Ukraine and the news and the support in general from the public that we can keep going to make sure that the Ukrainians can continue to fight on and continue the struggle to one day see the Ukrainian blue and yellow flag flying over the entirety of all Ukraine. And so with that, we will now be moving on into the question segment to address all of the super chats that have been sent in tonight, as well as many live chats as we can too. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our final question segment here, we have two polls to address like usual, but I'm going to go a little bit out of order and address the poll that was just put up. Was this Zelensky's best speech of the war? 84% said yes and 16% said no. Now, for me, I think this was his best speech of the war. I think this was his most poetic, like the Enforcer was saying. It was also a lot of thought put in it. You could tell that somebody was sat down and really thought this up. And I think this was his best one yet. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say it was the best speech of this war. I would say that this is equivalent to the "We Shall Fight" speech from Winston Churchill. A great one. It had a lot of good points, had a lot of good statements. It was all artfully put together. And while a lot of people don't consider oration to be an art form, speech writing and orating speeches, I do consider an art, and I would have to consider that one to put down the books for sure. The best one of the war yet. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll further well. And it looks like it was a pretty unanimous answer. 83% of everyone on the poll said yes. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that poll, and we're now going to be moving into the questions. And so, well, I mean, I think we have more polls, don't we, Matthew?
Yes, we do. So the next poll said, do you think Ukraine will learn to effectively defend against the Shahed drones? It looks like 93% said yes, they will adapt and defend. 4% said, I'm not sure. And 3% said, no, the drones are hard to destroy. Now, for me, I think the drones are pretty difficult to destroy, but the Ukrainians are very ingenuitive. They come up with different ways to take care of different problems very quickly. And I think that they will do so now in this situation. It may take them a little time, but they will eventually get around to solving the problem. But Enforcer, what do you think?
And I would have to definitely agree that while the Ukrainians don't really have a defense for the Shahed drones right now, it is only a matter of time and a matter of giving the bright minds in Ukraine a little bit of leg room to be able to figure out a solution to destroying these Shahed drones. And I'm sure that here in the future, we'll see that they've come up with a very effective mean to shoot those things down before they can ever reach their target. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And it looks like everyone also unanimously agrees that it's only a matter of time until the Ukrainians come up with a defense against the evil Shahed. I mean, like, really, you usually can't put an emotion to a machine, but That thing is raw evil. The concept of a suicide drone and sending these in mass from Iran to Russia to be used against the civilian populace of Ukraine is just evil in its purest form. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that poll and on into our next one.
All right, so now moving into our questions, we have a $50 super chat from 3 Michael, who says, you have an impressive knowledge of military history. Have you ever seen an invading force recover after the kind of collapse that the Russians have led in Kharkiv and Kherson?
I have not. And also thank you for the support, 3 Michael, because it helps this channel keep on running, but I have not. There is very few historical instances where that happened. And they're entirely different than the situation the Russians will ever be able to find themselves in. One of these situations, I would say, is the Battle of France, which turned out to be an incredible disaster for both the French and the British, as the French were decisively defeated in mainland France, and their, I guess you could say, their overseas colonies, for example, in Algeria and elsewhere, continued on the struggle under the leadership of, for some reason I'm about to say Macron, it was Charles de Gaulle. And also, Britain suffered a humiliating defeat and had to end up retreating out of the town of Dunkirk across the sea and left behind most of their equipment that they started off the war with. The British Expeditionary Force was nothing more than a shell of what it had entered the war being. That was one of the few examples that I could say a military suffered a humiliating, a blistering defeat and somehow recovered from it. But one has to remember the only reason the British recovered is because they had nearly 3 years to do so. And of course, North Africa is something that happened almost immediately after the crushing defeat at the Battle of France, but still, that was not as high intensity as a lot of people believe, although the Germans and the Italians would lose. And that, of course, was a decent regard to the amount of support that the U.S. started supplying the British at that point, and also U.S. intervention in North Africa, which helped out massively and helped to alleviate a lot of pressure off of the British forces in Egypt. But moving on from that, that is one of the few instances I can think of a military recovering, but there's a different context there. There's not a sea, there's not a channel that divides the Russians from the Ukrainians, much like there was for the Germans and the British. The Russians now cannot rely on something like the Royal Navy in 1940 to defend their mainland and allow them to recover from such blistering defeats like this. The war must go on. There is not a time where they can sit back and try and rebuild everything over the course of several years. This war is still high intensity. It's still moving at quite a decent speed and pace, although it's been going on for 8 months. And so they will not be able to recover from these defeats like the British did at Dunkirk. They are most likely going to be on the path, if I had to compare this to anything, to the Germans, of course, to draw on World War II or World War I, for example, as well. They're on the path of the Germans in 1918 or in 1944 and 45, where the onslaught is continuing to come their way, and there's no time for them to take a pause or try and slow down the fighting so that way they can recover their forces and their supply situation. It just can't happen in this war due to those reasons. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, 3 Michael. That kind of support helps this channel to keep on running, and without viewers like you who help to support us behind the scenes and keep our lights on, this wouldn't be possible. And so with that, thank you so much. I hope we were able to address that question fairly well with some historical context, both for and against the recovery of Russian armed forces. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Lacey Marie, who says, hey, Enforcers, I've been watching the streams after they are live and first time making a live stream. Happy to support you all and best in your future presidential run. Hashtag Enforcer 2040.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and also thank you for voting for me in the future for the President of the United States. Of course, one thing that always is kind of a little bit funny and ironic is that I say that we don't talk about any politics on this channel, yet my ambition is to become a politician. You know, it's kind of a little bit funny when you think about it, and of course, that always begs the question from some people as to what party I'm running with, and you'll have to wait and see. I honestly feel that parties don't really matter. I feel like it should matter more so the qualifications and the competency of the person more so than the party they're running with. And, you know, of course, that's getting into a whole rabbit hole of its own, but hopefully I seem to be a competent enough person and a logical enough person that regardless of party affiliation, one could say this is a person that could lead the country well. And hopefully I would, if I do become president, I would be able to lead the country well and go down as a great statesman. Not anyone who guided us through the Third World War or anything, but at least ensured that everyone was living in a prosperous time during our nation's history. But moving on from that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, really cool to hear you finally made the pilgrimage from watching the streams after they become videos, and now you're watching the stream as a live stream. And so I thank you so much for the support. I hope you enjoy us, of course, thanking you on stream. A lot of people make pilgrimages to the live stream that watch it after it becomes a video. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and also for watching these streams. Of course, while this is the first time supporting this channel, I thank you so much for just watching it after stream. I love to know that people do count on this as a source of news and information, and hopefully we are able to deliver that fairly accurately each and every night. We do make the occasional slip up, but hopefully we correct that before we get too entrenched into it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Super Action General, who says, Enforcer, is it possible for the Ukrainians to secretly launch an amphibious landing on the Kinburn Peninsula near Kherson? I personally think it would successfully flank orc positions there and Slava Ukraine.
Now, to answer that question, I don't think the Ukrainians could launch an amphibious invasion anywhere. Because, one, the Ukrainian Navy does not exist, so there's no naval support for that landing force, and while it can be coastal and relegated to the shore, a naval invasion force is very vulnerable to attack, especially with the kind of supplies and the amount of ships or boats that the Ukrainians would be will be working with. It would be a very small landing force, and it would be limited because of that reason. They could probably only transport over a few hundred soldiers and probably several tons of supplies at a time, and so the scope of that kind of invasion would be quite limited. So I don't really see that an amphibious landing of any kind, whether it's on the Dnieper River reservoirs or further out at sea, somewhere in the Dniprovska Gulf, I just don't see any of them working for that reason. The Ukrainians are limited in that one scope. They do quite well in others, and they're well supplied when talking about a conventional land war, but with amphibious invasions, they do fall short in that category. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question fairly well. Once again, that's in my opinion. It is possible that Ukrainian forces could land and successfully launch some kind of amphibious landing if everything's in their favor, but for the most part, I see it as quite risky in my opinion. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Dwayne Porter, who says, Good evening. I believe the U.S. knows something big is about to happen. We have the 101st Airborne close to the border, war games with NATO allies, and a warship close to Russia in the water. What do you think?
And that is true. It does appear that NATO is geared up to go at a moment's notice. That's most likely posturing. And while it does seem like it, and you can go with it either way, it makes a logical end in both directions. It could be that the higher up, I guess you could say, heads of state, politicians and such, know more than we do across the entirety of NATO, and they are prepared to go into war because it could happen any day. But at the same time, you could reach another logical end to say that they are doing this as a show of force to make sure that the Russians do not enter a war in fear of immediate Western reprisal. That could also be the case. Either one can be argued for by both means. Both of them are fair assessments of the situation. We really don't know which way it could go, but I always lean on the side of optimism, of course, because usually things turn out to be a lot less dire than they are. And I think that this is being done, for example, the 101st in Romania, among other instances, to deter the Russians from going into a war, because they will see that the West, while we don't mobilize necessarily anymore in the modern day, the West is already mobilized and is ready to go if need be. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that it's not the case that we are out of the loop and the Western governments here in our sphere know a little bit more than the common citizenry, because if so, and it is that, and that is the case, we could be in for a pretty rough next few years. Or next few months, depending, well, most likely next few months. But with that, I thank you so much once again. I hope I was able to address that question, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $15 super chat from Ben, who says, "You spoke about the disappearing gun. My city, Dunedin, New Zealand, has the world's only restored Armstrong disappearing gun at Fort Tayrora." I'm butchering that. Sorry about that. He says, "In other news, the study of war reported that Russia wants to knock out satellites."
And thank you for the support. Also, let's see here. Where is this in New Zealand? Oh, it's on the southeastern end of the southern island. I forgot the name of this island in particular. I believe it is just called the South Island, but I'm not entirely sure. So correct. Yeah, it is. It's the South Island. So moving on down here, we've got to find the gun. Come on, we got to find it. It's going to be close to the harbor, I assume, or maybe a little bit further out. There's a Signal Hill lookout. Like I say that like I know what it is. The Flagstaff lookout. Goat Island. I wonder why it was called Goat Island. The Tub. Dang it! Ah, man, I gotta go and pull it up now. Disappearing gun. In Dunedin. Let's see. At Fort. Let's just pull it up on Google Maps here. I'm sure this will be. Oh, we were right there. I think we were right there. Yeah, we were. It's right out here. Dang it, we were so close, Matthew. We were so freaking close. But let me go over here and let me go find the gun. So go out here, and this is the fort. About in this area right here, you can see some outcroppings of it sticking out of the ground here and there. But let's take a look at this gun. Oh, is that neat or what? It's actually quite a small gun when you see this kid by it.
Oh, look at the kids hanging all over it.
Yeah, look at the kids having a fun time near the weapons of war. And we can also see some kind of a little diorama set up showing how the forces would have used the gun back in the day.
Drive anybody else crazy when they see kids like climbing all over like a museum exhibit.
It does drive me crazy in a way, but you know, it is what it is, and it's good to know that kids are interested in it. Maybe it'll inspire them to read up a little bit more about it and get into history, hopefully. But still, really cool to see that y'all have one. I believe the British have one as well, somewhere in some port. I forgot which one it was. I believe it's on the English Channel, like Plymouth. But still, I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. And also, we have heard from many viewers tonight. We have seen ourselves that the Russians have threatened to shoot down U.S. military satellites, but that's nothing more than an idle threat. They really have no way to follow through on it due to their limitations in terms of spacefaring abilities that have been brought on by the heavy sanctions. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also sharing that information with us. And also, considering, did he say that Dunedin is his hometown?
Let's see. He said, yeah, my city. Like England is my city.
England is my city. Look how beautiful that is, Matthew. Look at that.
That is pretty nice, actually. I didn't know New Zealand looked so nice.
That is beautiful. It makes me want to go to New Zealand. Look at, wow, that is impressive.
That looks like that building, you know, at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. That's like the building they have like right at the beginning.
It does, doesn't it? Also, it looks like they may have some kind of a Chinatown. This honestly looks like one of the memorial arches in Taipei in Taiwan or the Republic of China. But real quick, let's drop down on a street view and see what this town looks like right around here. Let's see. Pretty neat. It's got some like late Victorian style buildings. This honestly reminds me a lot of Britain. Like for example, Portsmouth or Southampton. It looks a lot like that same style, and honestly it probably is. But still, I thank you so much for the support and also letting us take a look at your hometown of Dunedin. Way down on the southeastern side of the South Island in New Zealand. Also, New Zealand's a beautiful country from what I know. Let's drop up here real quick. I know that this is kind of burning time a little bit, but now I'm really interested. Would you look at that? This looks like the Rocky Mountains, Matthew.
Yeah, it does actually.
Yeah, it looks like Yellowstone, really.
They've got the cattle gate, the little wooden fence.
Yeah, the beautiful little clear, creek, river, whatever it is. It's beautiful out here. Wow, you have people in New Zealand.
No, that person rode all the way out there on that bike.
And they got a little fuzzy seat.
Oh, got to be comfy.
Yeah, you got to be comfy. But a beautiful place. And I got to thank you so much for letting us take a quick look at New Zealand. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And someone said Dunedin. And thank you, Cavern, for clarifying that. We're not good with pronunciations here, but I'm sure that a lot of y'all, and of course, this all comes with territory. pronouncing town names just comes with being in the area, but a lot of people would call Mobile in Alabama Mobile, and probably a lot of people would call some of these other towns some pretty crazy names as well.
And for sure, go down to that town in Mississippi, like right before you get to Biloxi. It starts with a G, and I don't say it. And yeah, how do you supposed to say that? Like, that's a big debate.
If you know how to answer it, don't answer it. But if you don't know how to answer it, take a pot shot at it. Try and spell it out kind of like in a phonetic way in the live chat. And we'll probably circle back to that if we can and say what it is actually pronounced like, because it'll blow y'all away what that actually sounds like. But with that, we are now going to move on to the next question. And thank you so much once again for the support and allowing us to take a look at all of those neat tidbits. And I hope I answered that question fairly well.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat from 3 Michael, who puts in another $20 donation and says, I believe it's pronounced Wagner, named after the composer whose ideology inspired a certain leader of Germany in World War II.
And thank you for the support once again, 3 Michael, and you are correct. It is pronounced Wagner, as in, I believe, Richard Wagner, who actually came up with a lot of nice music. If y'all have ever heard of Wagner's compositions, they are quite nice. And I would suggest listening to them. I believe he's one of the classics in terms of late 19th century composers when you listen to his music, but you would be correct. That is what they're named after. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running and supporting us as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Scott Menson got it right. He said Gaucher. When I first saw it, I think when I was a lot younger, I said Gaudier, I think. Like, I had no idea how to pronounce it. It's actually like French or something. But it's actually Gaucher, believe it or not. I saw some people mispronouncing it like I did.
Yeah, it is Gaucher. It's French. And so it doesn't have a conventional English pronunciation. It is a French pronunciation. Also, that goes for a couple of other things like D'Iberville, but that one's quite straightforward. Mississippi City, when in the world did that exist? I've never heard of Mississippi City.
I've never heard of Mississippi City ever.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. There's also, let's see if I remember correctly. I'm trying to move around and find some interesting.
New Orleans.
New Orleans. That one's quite true. Everyone knows New Orleans. Also, look how badly the bayou is just getting messed up. Jeez, that's bad. This is all erosion. It used to stretch all the way out to where the murky water is down here, and you can see these small barrier islands, but the bayou is kind of getting consumed by the sea these days, and New Orleans, well, Louisiana's state starting to lose a lot of its ground and a lot of its marshland because of it. But that's a whole thing for a whole other time. Probably could make a video on it, but still a very interesting topic. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $15 super chat from Colleen Emsley, who says, thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. Glad you enjoyed my helis yesterday. FYI, I'm a single mom with 4 athletic kids. Had a cow/calf and horse farm while doing my heli thing. Calling Lake is a dense forest and great walleye fishing.
And thank you for the support and also adding in a little bit to the story. And that's really cool to hear. And also, it looked like an empty place out there at Lake Calling up there. Let's see if we can find it again. It's in Alberta, I believe. There's a lot of lakes up here, actually. Geez, there's a lot of big ones. Like Egg Lake. I wonder what's in Egg Lake, man. You want to go fishing for eggs at Egg Lake? But Lake Calling, sadly, I can't find it again, but I do thank you for sharing it a little.
Wait a minute, Saskatchewan.
That is Saskatchewan.
What was that sauce that they had out for a while at McDonald's?
The Szechuan sauce.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it looked like the same spelling, like Saskatchewan.
Yeah, and there was all those weird people going into McDonald's and screaming, "Where's my Szechuan sauce?" You know, just making themselves look like fools. But yeah, this is Saskatchewan. It's not Szechuan. That's a Chinese thing. But that's probably the weirdest province in all of Canada in terms of how it's pronounced. And also, Matthew, here's something funny. British explorers found this place right here, you know, this island. And they're like, what should we name this newfound land? And then they named it Newfoundland. Oh man!
And then down there at the bottom, Saint Pierre and Miquelon. It's like that's like the names of 2 people. It sounds like.
Yes, it's. I believe it's the name of. And of course, this is making a huge logical jump, but the 2 French explorers that probably found those islands. So And of course, there's Nova Scotia, which I also believe is a French name, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. But still, names are really cool and interesting in how they came around. I honestly do not know how out of all of the normal named provinces in Canada, like the Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, the Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan came to be. If anyone could share that with me and give me a little bit of a history story about how that came around, let me know, because I would be interested in hearing it. And so with that,
You know what's really wild though? Like, this is going to sound really stupid, but when they put Alaska on maps, they make it look like the normal size of a state, but when you see it from like this view, like Alaska is huge. Like, it takes up like half the country.
well, interestingly enough, Matthew, I'm about to blow your world. Well, blow your mind, not your world, but the map is incredibly inaccurate in terms of size, even here. Russia is not that big. Like, it's not that big, because on this map, Russia looks bigger than Africa. But this is because of something called the Mercator projection, where they tried to figure out how to make a circular globe fit on a flat map. And so they found out that if you take a balloon, like a flexible shaped balloon, and you I guess you could say cartography, hopefully that's the correct word, the world onto that globe, and then stuck it inside of a tube on this balloon, the ink would set, and you could unroll this piece of paper that was inside of to get a somewhat accurate representation of the world on a flat map that was not a globe. The Mercator, it's not Mercator, it's the Mercator projection. But that's the reason why Alaska looks so large. If we actually went map size comparison, I think there's a website where the true size of, here we go. So true size of Alaska. Click enter, and here we go. Here's Alaska, okay, and it looks big, but if we move it closer to the equator, it gets a lot smaller. And so we put it near and so we put it near Texas. It's that big.
Dang.
It's still massive.
Huge though.
Yeah, it's still massive. I mean, like, the area around Anchorage is about the size of Alabama, but
no, wait, when you move it up toward like the United States, it actually is like almost the same size as it is up top.
Yeah, it is. It's still fairly big. It's an impressively large size state. But still, it's not that big. And also, it really puts it into comparison when you do something like that with Ukraine, and you move it. No. And also they fit in the United States, China, and India onto Africa. That shows you how big Africa as a continent is. But we move it over here, and we put Ukraine in Alaska, and that's how big Ukraine is compared to Alaska. And also, we move that aside. Here's the state of Montana, and you can see that Montana and Ukraine are actually similarly sized almost.
Nah, that's crazy. I thought Ukraine was a little bit smaller than that.
No, it's not. And if we put that over Alabama, Ukraine is about the size of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and the Panhandle put together.
That's crazy. Also, I gotta appreciate, they literally have a website for everything these days. Like, I had no idea this website existed.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then when you put them on the equator, of course, they get the smallest, because the equator is the most accurate representation of their real size, because it's the middle part of the map. So they are incredibly small once you put them on the equator. And then when you move Ukraine over to Africa, it gives you a scale of how big Africa is. But with that, we are now going to be moving on to the next question. And I thank you so much once again for the support, and also sharing a little bit more of your story. And of course, it was really cool to hear that you flew that many helicopters. That was just insane to hear that someone had such a cool career flying all of those very cool helicopters. I loved all of them. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well, and we also went down a big rabbit hole, but hopefully it was an interesting one. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
Next, a big shout out to Barrett Jex for putting in a $15 donation, as well as Heather Fitzgibbon for putting in a $10, along with Shen Go, who puts in a $10 donation as well. Thank you very much to all three of you for the support of the channel. And you don't leave comments, but we appreciate the sentiment and the support. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words?
Yes, I would love to thank all of y'all for the support. Y'all have been around, of course, like Heather Fitzgibbon, y'all have been around for quite a while, and y'all have been helping this channel to keep on running behind the scenes, helping us to keep the lights on, and helping us to keep this thing rolling. For that, I have to thank each and every one of y'all, because without y'all, it wouldn't be possible to keep this channel running, it wouldn't be possible for me to continue to go to college, and all those things, and so I've got to thank y'all so much, because due to y'all, and y'all helping out this channel, I'm able to focus on doing this as a full-time job. And so with that, thank you to all three of y'all once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Lord Jurek, who says if Putin was smart, he would pull out of Ukraine while he still has an army left to use.
And I would agree entirely. If he was smart, he would pull out with an army left to use. But I think at this point, considering how the Russians have been treating this, I think the Russians are kind of, well, Putin's kind of viewing this as an all-or-nothing war where they either lose it all or they get it all. And he's willing to just run the Russian army into oblivion, literally until the end of time and the end of manpower in actual existence in Russia to try and win this war. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support, and I would entirely agree with you that if he was smart, he would pull them out of Ukraine while he still can. Also, Matthew, someone just brought up that while I said Russia was not that big on a map, I never actually showed it on this map. So real quick, let me go grab Russia, and let me do that.
While you're grabbing Russia, I saw Alexander Nev say a Big Mac looks nothing like the picture either. And man, you were speaking big facts.
Big facts about the Big Mac.
Yes.
All right, Matthew, now here's what's nuts, all right? You see, Russia is right at the top of the world, so on a globe, it's actually curved. But on this map, it's almost bowed outwards towards the top of the map. When you move Russia towards the equator, this is what it really looks like. That's Russia.
Russia's just.
And so if you put it over Australia, it's still big. It's a massive country. It takes up 15% of the landmass of the Earth. But if you put it over something like the United States, still big. It's still bigger than the United States, but it's not as big as it's made out to look like on a normal Mercator projection map. This map...
I guarantee you a bunch of teachers don't know about this because I was never told anything about this, and I guarantee you the teachers represented that was the actual size of Russia.
Well, yeah, you know, like they'll sit there and tell you the population of Russia and say that's not a big country population-wise, but they never tell anyone in school, at least where we grew up, that Russia is not that big. It's big, yes, but it's not as big as it's made out to look like on this map, because on this map, it's made out to look like it's almost like half of the world's landmass is Russia. But it's not. It's only 15%, and the map makes it look like a lot more just because of the limitation of putting a globe on a flat surface. But with that, I hope that clears that up for a second. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you for reminding me about me overlooking that completely. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from the B Knight 3, who says, Vassal, the faithful Ukrainian Marine Recon Service Dog, Vassal, the badass warhound, check the post by you, Concrete Beats, based Doggo, for an amazing meme. Cover this K9 Corso story, please.
Vasily the dog. Vasily the dumpling. Vasily the little dumpling. Is this Vasily the dog? And can you tell me that again, Maddie? Can you give me the information about the dog real quick?
Vassal, the faithful Ukrainian Marine Recon Service Dog. That's a long title for that doggo.
Oh, it's this little. We've shown him before. It's this little fella, Matthew. he's a cute little dog. Oh man, I love this dog. I haven't seen him in a while. We showed this picture a long time ago, but yes, a very good dog, very cool dog at that, and he's got a really cool rig to go with it. And so with that, I thank you so much for support and also bringing him up again because it's a cool, cute little dog, and we could see him here in another picture. Just look at him; he looks happy doing his job, and I bet he is. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and allowing us to look at these cute pictures of this very cool doggo again. And I gotta say, 10 out of 10, one of the best. I love dogs, and I love to see working dogs look this cute. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Kristen Adams, who says, love the use of the word puffery. Cheers.
And thank you so much for enjoying my use of the word puffery. I actually did not know about the word puffery until about a year and a half ago, and since then it has now become a part of my normal vocabulary because puffery is nothing but puffery. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and I'm glad that you do enjoy me using it. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Wannabe a Race Truck, who says, Slava Ukraine, what do you think will happen when the Ukrainians retake their entire country, as I don't see Putin rolling over and taking it?
Well, there are a couple of options. There's always not a surefire option. We can only list the I guess you could say, the available options. One, the war enters this quasi-ended, quasi-still going on kind of state. Kind of like the Korean War. in case y'all didn't know, the Korean War has never ended. While we signed a, I guess you'd say, well, not really a non-aggression pact, the United States signed something of a peace agreement with the Chinese as well as the North Koreans. The South Koreans and the North Koreans never did that. And so technically they're still at war, and sometimes they do exchange shots still and still kill each other's forces. That's something that still happens to this day. Well, not often, but every once in a while. And so I could see that this war could go in the same direction. If the Ukrainians retook everything, Crimea, the DPR, the LPR, and the occupied areas, the Russians may never give up on the war, and if Putin remains in power, it may enter this quasi-existent phase, like the Koreas, where shots are exchanged every once in a while. The border is a very hostile place where people cannot go, but they're still kind of in a war, kind of not. That is one way it could go. Another way that it could go is that the war goes so poorly that Putin resigns, or Putin flees the country, or Putin gets executed or overthrown, and then a new government steps in and agrees with a peace treaty on Ukraine, and that could change the fate of Russia forever. There is also a third option where Russia does nuke Ukraine, the West gets involved, it becomes the Third World War, and then a nuclear onslaught is only minutes away, or months away at that point. And so with that, I hope that lays out the three options we're looking at. I believe the third one is the least viable option out of terms of the Ukrainians pushing the Russians out. And so with that, I hope that does address the the question fairly well. It's a great question, and I hope that those three options seem somewhat logical and viable. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, and also a really good question.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from KG, who says Article 5 could be invoked if deemed critical infrastructure. For example, hitting GPS satellites that guide commercial aircraft and ground commercial air traffic.
And I thank you for the support. And can you reread that one again so that way I can make sure to clarify it in my head?
Article 5 could be invoked if deemed critical infrastructure. Example, hitting GPS satellites that guide commercial aircraft and ground commercial air traffic.
And thank you for the support, and I could see that as well. It doesn't, well, it lays out that an attack upon the land of NATO would be, you know, a direct provocation of Article 5. And so if something like that did happen that pertained to the infrastructure and workings of NATO countries, I could agree that that would most likely invoke Article 5. And that's also a pretty good point as well. Someone also said earlier on that there has been an extenuation or some kind of an addendum to the NATO Charter that includes objects in space. We have not seen that article on stream, but I wouldn't doubt that it exists, considering that, I guess you could say, space has become incredibly important to the world, specifically in the use of satellite communications. And in case y'all didn't know, quick little rabbit hole, we're going to make this like 5 seconds long. The space above the planet is starting to fill up with trash so much that we really are starting to run out of room to put satellites up there. Believe it or not, that's kind of crazy. But with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you for letting us have that added in, because I think that is a good point. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $40 super chat from Catherine Kingdon, who says, sorry, Enforcer, we have a Dunedoo in Australia, pronounced the scene Dunedoo, but in Dunedin in New Zealand has a very strong Scottish heritage in Dunedin, and comes from the Scottish word for Edinburgh, which is probably a very strong Scots accent.
And thank you so much for the support, Catherine, and also clarifying that. That is interesting here. And now we're starting to get into some Australian New Zealand history and lore in a way. And it's always interesting here. Australia and New Zealand, to most of the world, are very similar countries, but y'all have a decent amount, well, I think it's friendly banter at this point, but y'all actually have a decent amount of animosity against each other. I believe the sole reason is because Australia at a time used to be a prison colony and New Zealand wasn't, so I'm guessing that that's where some of the animosity may have come from you know, historically a long time ago, almost 150 years ago at this point. But still, really interesting to hear that there was just slight variations in town pronunciations and names just depending on which country they're in. Also, I would not doubt that whatsoever. It's probably entirely because there was a lot of Scottish, I guess you could say, immigrants that came to New Zealand in this area, and that's probably where it did get its name. Also, one thing that's always interesting to me, and I don't know if you noticed this, Matthew, but in Australia and New Zealand, they have these clearly defined industrial areas. Like, you can tell them practically from space when you're looking at a town like this. It's like, oh, that's the industrial area right there. You know, and like you can see it. Like it's weird because you can't see that in other towns, like for example, Los Angeles. If we go to Los Angeles here, you can see, well, actually, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. You can't see them right here. So
Please don't put your foot in your mouth.
I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth. That's not healthy, but still, you can still see the industrial areas from space here quite well too. For some reason, though, to me, it seems like it's almost just super pronounced when you're looking at Australian towns and New Zealand towns. And what kind of McDonald's was that? What in the world? That
Man, that's like the
that's
Minecraft
gourmet.
McDonald's.
That's gourmet McDonald's.
They have a toothpick in it and everything. And look at that lettuce; it's so perfect.
Oh my god! Y'all got a
Look how
whole
clean that McDonald's is.
You actually have Ronald McDonald still and a playground in that thing. We don't have that in America anymore. McDonald's turned into like an internet cafe. Wow, I really want to go to New Zealand now, but they still do have the hotcakes. They have the hotcakes.
They have those same hotcakes, but they have a nice looking coffee with it, though.
Yeah, with like a little nice like toasted top. What the world? Y'all lucky over there in New Zealand. Then like everyone, I can see all of the American viewers in here. We can see them now because their minds are blown. We don't have anything like this in America. What in the world?
Wait, if they can do this in New Zealand, that means they can do it here in the United States. Why do they like dumb it down so much for us?
You know, because they're, to market this to foreign markets are not as stupid as the Americans, so we have to make it look all frou-frou. That's probably what they say at the corporate meeting. I honestly don't eat McDonald's.
I wonder if in New Zealand, most of the people that work at McDonald's are like, "What you want?"
I gotta be honest with y'all. I don't eat at McDonald's here in America. I don't eat it out overseas because I don't go overseas because I don't like their food. It doesn't taste good anymore, and for the price, you can go get food anywhere else that's better. But I'm blown away. I'm really shocked at how New Zealand. Look at the muffins. We don't have crap like this in America. This is unbelievable. This is a crime.
Oh, they do have, I know in England, in McDonald's, they have that like combination, like hash brown, like ketchup and everything in one like thing. I can't remember what it is. It's like some kind of like combo. You know what I'm talking about, Enforcer?
I think I do. Speaking of which, when you go to Britain, it's so weird to see how they and we're really starting to go down rabbit holes, Matthew. Also, how many super chats do we have left so that way I can understand how many rabbit holes we can go down?
I think we'll have to cut this rabbit hole short.
I was thinking that, but we're going through some pretty crazy rabbit holes tonight, and I hope y'all been enjoying them. But due to time reasons, we're going to have to cut this one a little bit short and get on to the next question. But thank you so much once again for the support, Catherine. I hope you enjoyed that crazy rabbit hole that went from talking about different pronunciations to how frou-frou the McDonald's are in New Zealand. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Dakman555. Who says, "Thanks, Don, for all you do, Enforcers, Don. And I want to remind the LSA how much the likes help the channel, Don."
And thank you so much for the support, Don. Of course, hitting the like button helps us out a lot, Don. If you hit the like button, it spreads this to other people, Don.
But of course, thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for the kind words as well in helping to support this channel. If y'all would like to, please hit the like button, because that helps us out a whole load and reaches this Lee Spring Army out to even more people. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that that addresses the comment fairly well.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Richard Daniel Jr., who says, please tell KPX 1138 to watch his step next to wet spots while checking out waterfalls. Oink oink. I hope he enjoys his time camping.
Yeah, and of course, I just checked on KBX 1138 just the other day, and he said he was at well, I don't want to say where he was, but he is at a state national park, I believe. Yeah, a national park in Alabama. He's having a fun time, and I hope that he's been enjoying it. Also, in case if he is watching right now, be careful around the waterfalls. You can fall and bust your head wide open on the rocks around there. So be careful, but make sure to have a fun time still. Don't become like a worrywart, wrapping yourself in bubble wrap or anything, but make sure to stay safe. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Richard Daniel Jr. Also, welcome back. It's been a while since I've seen you active a lot in the live chat, and it's good to see that you're still supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Richard, for the support. Of course, go through the little spiel as usual. You help us to keep the lights on, help us to keep this channel running, and of course, without it, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing going. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Really Mean, who says, "How many Russian soldiers are caught in Kherson side?"
Let's see, if the Russians were caught in Kherson, we don't know the exact numbers right now, but I would estimate at least over 10,000. But then again, that's a very rough estimate. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question the best I can. Take it with a grain of salt. That's a massive approximation. It may not be accurate whatsoever. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Karnov Talonhawk, who says, Macca's in Australia pays nearly 20 Australian an hour. That's 15 USA. That might explain the difference. I wouldn't get out of bed for less than 20 an hour. And let me tell you something, 20 an hour in the United States, that's doing pretty good for that like the entry-level job. That's like pretty high.
So real quick, I want to find McDonald's jobs pay. Let's see here. What does McDonald's pay per hour in Alabama? $10.07. So it is a pretty big bump. It's 20% below the national average also. But it's a pretty big bump from $10 to $15 an hour. But that is pretty interesting to see. But still, I gotta be honest with y'all. Nothing against McDonald's workers, but for them to go through McDonald's and order something simple like, I would like a Big Mac please with a large fry, and then they give you a Big Mac with 3 slices of cheese on top of it, and then they give you a small fry, and then if you order a drink, you just don't get a drink. It just irks the hell out of me how poor the actual process of ordering and getting food at McDonald's is, because you spend almost as much time trying to correct the order that you were supposed to spend just getting it. I don't know if that's just something with our local area and our McDonald's, but it's so annoying you can't even get any food there because you're just knowing that you just get whatever the hell they're cooking back there. You know, it's not even what you ordered. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support and also letting us know that, because that is interesting to hear. And that may also be why McDonald's pretty much market themselves as a gourmet burger restaurant overseas. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for letting us know that.
Right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Classified Veteran, who says, in order to stop Iranian drones from attacking key infrastructure, would a modern rendition of barrage balloons like what was around London in World War II, but smaller and more localized if possible?
I would have to say barrage balloons, something similar to it, would probably do a pretty good job. I think that something that would do a really great job is to implement the idea of barrage balloons along with nets below them. Just get a large hollow piece of aluminum pipe about 40 feet long, maybe 50 feet long, and then just put a net below it with some weights at the bottom, so that way these drones could fly into the nets, get damaged enough that it most likely destroy its airfoil, and then it would most likely just crash to the ground because the wings wouldn't be able to support it through its flight anymore. And that is something that could be done, and for that reason, I do think that a modern, I guess you could say, comeback of the barrage balloon could probably happen and be somewhat, at least slightly effective, and slightly effective is better than nothing. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from John D, who says, always grateful for military history rabbit holes. Looking forward to hearing more about Marines versus pirates. Please pick a question from the chat, and thanks.
And thank you so much for the support. And before we get to the question from the chat, I'm going to make that story as quick as possible. Back in the early 1800s, we're talking about, well, really, it was the very late and very early 1700s and 1800s, around the 1798 to 1805 time frame. There were a group of pirates that owned the entirety of North Africa called the Berber Pirates, also known as Corsairs, which is where the name for the Corsair plane comes from later. They would ransack and raid ships at sea from the British and the French, and really everyone that went ferrying around the sea, and they would demand ransoms for the crews. If they didn't get paid that ransom, they would sell the crews off into slavery, because, you know, slavery was the thing that that just happened all over the place. So it was kind of just a normal economic practice. So the British and the French decided that we don't negotiate with terrorists, but here's the money you're asking for. We'll actually pay y'all annually if you do not raid ships flying the British and French flag. So that's why the Barber Pirates didn't mess with them. Then the Barber Pirates saw American ships and American flags start to fly over the North Atlantic near Europe, and they're like, hey, that is a brand new economy. And so they're like, hey, America, Britain and France are paying for us to not raid their ships. If you pay, we won't raid your ships. And the American government went, we don't negotiate with terrorists. And so the Corsairs went, oh, okay. And they started raiding American ships and taking the crews and selling them off into slavery. That was when the United States was like, oh crap, we need a navy. And that's why the USS Constitution was built for that specific reason, along with pretty much the foundation of the real US Navy. It happened right then in response to the Corsairs. They sent the Marines over on these ships. They raided a whole bunch of towns. Of course, one of them is Tripoli. That's where the part of the song, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, that's where that part of the song comes from, is that the Marines raided the town of Tripoli, and really the United States alone brought down the Corsair pirates in North Africa almost single-handedly. One of the first successes they had militarily in their history beyond the Revolutionary War. So with that, I hope you enjoyed that short little story, and we are now going to get to the live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Michael Johnson, who says, from 1 to 10, how much do you expect Kadyrov to make a seriously stupid, emotional mistake for revenge?
And what, I don't think anything's happened to Kadyrov to make him have an emotional revenge, unless if one of his sweet little kids got, like martyred, and of course I'm being a little sarcastic about all that, but I don't think anything will make him do anything. He's really an insignificant person that's just been made to seem important, but he really has no control over anything. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rob Bertram, who says, President Zelensky has the best speechwriters in the world, or do you guys think he writes his own speeches?
I have to say, it may, of course, Zelensky probably lays out the groundwork of what the speeches should say, but a head of state like Zelensky, a president like Zelensky, doesn't really have enough time to really sit down and write out an 8-minute long or a 9-minute long speech. So he probably has speechwriters that do most of the groundwork for him. He just kind of lays out the premise of the speech. But regardless of that, it's still, his oration delivers a lot to it, the presentation of it, all of that involved, and of course his general premise and idea. And so while he has amazing speechwriters and they deserve loads of credit, I do also think that Zelensky deserves a lot of credit for that as well. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rotor Max, who says, had to back up and watch again. Great speech by President Zelensky.
And thank you so much for the support. And I would have to agree, he had an amazing speech tonight. I think it was the best one he's ever done yet. And he's been setting the bar a little bit higher each time he's done one of these grand speeches over the course of the war. And hopefully we will see that this one will even be usurped by an even better speech later on. Hopefully this war won't go on too long for it to be usurped several times. But still, he's a great orator, that is for sure. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope we addressed that comment fairly well.
You're right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Roy CC07, who says, what's the chances of China taking advantage of Russia being preoccupied with Ukraine to take back lands north of them?
They most likely won't do that, mainly because of administrative costs. So they will most... One thing that a lot of countries do, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain this as fast as possible because I know we're probably running out of time. How many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
Let's see. 20.
Oh my lord. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. They're mostly going to start exhibiting a lot of economic soft power on the Russians, not hard power as in trying to retake territory and land. So I don't think they'll be taking advantage of the situation at all because, of course, while everyone else is under the nuclear gun, if China tried to do something like that, they too could be under the nuclear gun for trying to take over Russian territory. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. Thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $7 super chat from Karnov Talonhawk, who says, shout out to Rotormax. It was a great speech, made me bawl my eyes out. So much strength and empathy in it.
And thank you so much for the support. And I do agree, it was a great speech. The best one I've seen so far in the war. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And very quickly to go over the poll that I just put up, you have unlimited money to eat fast food. Where do you go? And sadly, there's only 4 options I could put on the poll. So it looks like 29% said In-N-Out Burger, which...
What? Chick-fil-A didn't win?
I don't think a lot of people know about Chick-fil-A unless you're in the South.
Oh my lord!
But it looks like 30% said In-N-Out Burger, which I haven't had, but I really want. 28% said Chick-fil-A, 25% said Macca's, and 17% said Taco Bell. And before old Taco Bell coming in last, I knew it was going to happen.
Man, I like Taco Bell, honestly. I mean, you know, I don't know why people don't like it, but...
I know why they don't like it.
Well, I mean, like, Taco Bell is a weapon of mass destruction. That's one thing everyone can agree on, but...
so was a Big Mac.
I would have to say if I had to vote on one of these, I would say Chick-fil-A. I think Chick-fil-A is the best in my opinion out of these 4 options. But then there's, you know, there's local chains. There's a local chain here in Birmingham called Hamburger Heaven, and I love Hamburger Heaven. The fries are perfect. The burgers are perfect. If you're in the Birmingham area or in Alabama and you're driving through Birmingham, make sure to get a Hamburger Heaven burger. You will not regret it. They're delicious and the fries are always perfect. You don't get a lot of the fries though. But with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we addressed that poll fairly well.
And the final word on it from my end, if Chipotle wasn't like horrible in their service anymore, that would be my #1 option. But sadly, they've gone downhill recently, and I really hate that. But anyways, moving on to our next one, we have a $10 super chat from Roy CC07, once again, who says, thank you for answering my question.
And also, thank you so much for the support again. And it is absolutely our pleasure to answer all the questions we can, whether they're sent in by a super chat, a live chat. Some people think that you have to pay to throw in a question. You don't. You can throw in a live chat. We try and get around to as many as we can tonight, but we always make sure to address everyone who super chats on this channel because they're the ones who help us to keep this thing running, so that way we have the chance of getting around to live chats. But thank you so much once again, and it was completely my pleasure, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And it's kind of a coincidence that we were talking about Chick-fil-A, and now I'm saying my pleasure. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mike Spike, who says, Enforcer Matt, look up Article 3 and Article 4 of the Outer Space Treaty, but ultimately it's up to NATO to decide what they want to do.
And thank you for the support. Sadly, due to time reasons, I won't be able to pull up those articles and really read over them and dissect them on stream right now. But I would assume that those satellites would be covered to probably heavy degrees, considering the economic investments that were put into putting them in orbit for that reason. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. We will try and look into that at some point. Sadly, it couldn't be tonight because I think we probably have like 15 super chats left. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Philip Fixes, who says, tonight's stream is the premiere of Down the Rabbit Hole, Stay Humble, Don't Get Lost in the Tunnels, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. I love that people do enjoy our rabbit holes. Some people complain about them. Well, really, it's a love or hate thing. Some people love them. Some people hate them. It really just depends on who you are. I, of course, love them because it allows me to talk about some things that I know outside of the war that people just might find is like, wow, that's really cool and interesting. And, you know, of course, what's interesting is that some people complain about them, but they always come on every night and they listen to them. So I'm supposing that it's kind of like a love-hate thing with those people. Maybe they just don't like him, but at the same time they like to hear him subconsciously. I don't know, but thank you so much once again for the support, and I'm glad that you do like the rabbit holes. I think they're neat. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and I'm officially starving now because of the poll. But anyways, it looks like a lot of people are as well. But I want to point out that Ole Wolansky and Suze K. Sullivan each put in a $5 donation and didn't leave a comment. But thank you both very much for the support, and we do appreciate it. Like always, we also have a $5 super chat from the B Knight 3, who says, correct me if I'm wrong, but IIRC and Abrams tank can run on vodka. If this is so, the U.S. Army can run their tanks fuel-wise against Russians to Moscow.
And thank you so much for the support, and that is true. The Abrams can run on some pretty interesting fuels, at least in theory. I don't know if they do that normally, but that would be pretty funny to see that the the tankers in the U.S. Army just raided Russian liquor stores, which I'm sure have a boundless supply of alcohol, to keep their tanks running onto Moscow, and the Russians would pretty much be supplying their own defeat free of charge to the U.S. Army. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and also a pretty funny comment. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat once more from Carniv Talonhawk, who says, "Can't afford this as I'm on a pension, but big shout out to all those who would like to and cannot."
No, Carniv. No. If you can't afford it, don't do it. Like, I thank you so much for the support, but if you can't afford to send in the super chat, don't feel pressured to. We love to have support from our viewers. That helps us to keep this thing running, but it's totally fine if you can't. Everyone, please understand that we never badger anyone for support. We thank everyone who supports the channel, and we thank everyone for just watching, even if you never throw in the super chat. I thank you all nonetheless. You do not have to throw in support, and especially if you can't afford it. I do not want anyone to get into any kind of financial burden trying to support this channel, but I thank you so much nonetheless, because you send it in, we can't give it back. YouTube doesn't allow us to refund the stuff. I think maybe y'all can, but we can't. But with that, thank you so much once again, Carniv. And if I had the ability to give that back to you, I would. But thank you so much once again for the kindness and trying to help this channel keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again. And everyone give a huge thanks to Carniv for the support. According to Super Chat, he can't afford it because he's a pensioner. But once again tell you, if you cannot afford it, do not send one in. But still, that was a very kind thing of you to do. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $25 super chat from Mech Tactical, who says, "Okay, seriously, Taco Bell is literally associated to putting things in your mouth and bad things happening to your bum. So how does it turn a profit?"
Well, let me just say this, everyone. Taco Bell is not supposed to be Mexican food. It's a Tex-Mex fast food, which is its own kind of subcategory of food. I find it to be edible. And sometimes I find it to be good.
Barely.
Well, oh, come on, Matthew. It's not that bad.
No, it's like a hit or miss. Like sometimes you get a soggy taco, and then like the next time it's okay. And it's just like really sketchy.
I will admit, depending on who makes your taco, sometimes you just get a mouthful of like sour cream with some bread, and that's not good. So I can't agree. It is a hit or miss. But they still do turn a profit. I think it's most likely because these days they do a lot of limited edition kind of gimmick foods. Usually they make them a lot better than their normal menu food. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well, Mech Tactical. And it's very interesting to see you're in Canada, but then again, I got to remember Taco Bell is kind of a worldwide thing. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. It's very interesting to see that the infamy of Taco Bell has reached that far. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And no, Mech Tactical, I cannot deny your logic on that one. And I saw some hilarious stuff in the live chat. I don't know if I can repeat that or not. I don't know if it'll be offensive, but I'll just pass on it and keep it to myself and try to make my way through the next super chat. Let's see here. Up next, we have a $20 donation from John Zedrin, who says, "Good morning from Sweden. Let's hope for the Swedish Archer system gets sent to Ukraine. Here is some coffee and donut cash so you can keep going. Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, John Zedrin. It helps us out a lot. It helps us keep us running, of course. And also, it's really cool to hear you're from Sweden. Of course, I can't go and drop down on Street View. Y'all know that's like my reflex thing because I'm always curious about different places in the world and what they look like, and it's always cool to see. But sadly, I can't do that right now due to time limitations. But thank you so much once again for the support, John Zedrin, and helping this channel to keep on running. We will be using that for coffee. I'm starting to run out of Nitro Cold Brew again. It looks like I may be getting like 3 more nights out of it, but then I'll have to go get some more. And so I will be using that to get more Nitro Cold Brew and probably some donuts as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, John Zedrin. It helps us out a lot. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, good morning to Sweden.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Scott Kemp, who says, "Was a leopard, ever delivered to Ukraine?"
Not that we know of. We know that the Germans are starting to provide more equipment, but the Leopard is not one of them. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Badger Resistance, who says Zelensky's best speech was "The fight is here. I need ammo, not a ride."
And thank you for the support. Very interesting comment. That was a very memorable speech, but still, this one was just eloquently put. That one was a good speech. Don't get me wrong. The ammunition not a ride speech was good, but this speech here, it was just so eloquently put together. The cinematography was great. The delivery was perfect. I really like this one. I still think I'll have to stick by this one's the best one I've seen in my opinion so far. But still, an argument can be made that one's still on up there, if not on par with the one we had tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for throwing in your 2 bits on that, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to discuss which speech they thought was the best from Zelensky. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, big shout out to Junebug72 and Thomas for putting in a $5 donation each, but without a comment. But once again, thank you both for your support, and we do appreciate it very much. And also, thank you for being longtime viewers, too. Then moving on to our next one, we have a $4 super chat from Carniv Talonhawk once again, who says, as an Aussie with a Russian sounding tag, I am not Russian. Can you give me a rundown of Bushmaster and maybe Owen Gun?
Yes, Owen Gun, super cool gun. Love the Owen Gun. Got to go through these as fast as I can. Owen Gun was made by a farm boy. Farm boy was sitting around goofing off in his farm boy land, in his farm boy home. He was like, cool, I can make a machine gun. He made this thing, he shot it a little bit, and then he got drafted. He left, he threw it in a garbage bin inside of their garage. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, well, not the Ukrainian, what world am I talking about? The Australian Ministry of Defense came around one day to this mother's home and was like, yeah, you know, your boy's off at war, that's a great thing. And they found this thing in the trash can, and they were like, oh my god, this thing is amazing. They went and tried it out. It worked like a charm. They were like, let's mass produce it. They mass produced the Farm Boy's gun. I forgot what happened to the Farm Boy, but this thing became an Australian legend, pretty much. And so it got used all the way into Vietnam and a little bit afterwards as well. Super cool gun, really neat. And moving on from that, I hope that summarizes the Owen Gun a little bit, and to the Bushmaster armored car, or the Bushmaster MRAP. This is an Australian-made armored car, armored personnel carrier, whatever you'd like to call it. It's really more of an armored car. Developed by the Australians. It is about the same as an MRAP, just a little bit different, a little bit differently designed. And it's made to protect the crew from anti-tank weapons and also mines and IEDs. And so with that, I hope that addresses both of those fairly well. A lot of information to unpack in a short amount of time, but I hope it was informational nonetheless. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that did address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Dagnabbit, Carniv threw in another one.
Dagnabbit. But, you know, let's see here. Uh-oh, my spreadsheet just locked up on me. Here we go. Any minute now. There we go. All right, so up next, we do have that one from Carniv Talonhawk, who says, again, guys, I, as an Aussie, can't do the fundraiser, so helping everyone in the world see this is my part. Raj, the Sook dog, will pay me back.
And thank you once again, Carniv. But if you can't afford it, don't send it in. I feel like that's going to make you send in another one. But don't, really. I mean, we're fine. We're fine. And I don't want you to get any kind of straits or hardships because of us. But I thank you once again. And, of course, if you're just in the live chat, we credit you with a lot of the success of the Lee Spring Army. You don't have to donate to the fundraisers. You don't have to send in super chat. We just thank you for being here. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Carniv. But don't send in another, please. You don't know. Like, and I'm not saying this is like a joke or anything. You don't know how bad it makes me feel when someone sends in support and says I really can't afford this, because, you know, the support's good. It helps us to keep running, but I don't like to think that I'm putting people in a hard spot because they supported the channel. So with that, I thank you so much once again. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and your over-generous kindness. But with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you again.
All right. And up next, we have another $4 super chat from Carniv Talonhawk, who says, wait a minute, I think I already read that one off. I think the spreadsheet's screwing up again.
Yeah, I think you did.
Let's see. All right, yeah, unchecked, like 3 of them that I've already read off. So thank you, Google Sheets, for that. But anyways, up next, we have a $3 super chat from Colleen Emsley, who says, P.S. Felt like Snoopy and the Red Baron in the biplane, straight into heaven, free-falling, loops, and upside-down goggles and scarf. Yeehaw!
Thank
Yeehaw!
Matt, you're going to have to get more confident with these walls because these walls are apparently thick because we haven't gotten any noise complaints yet.
Not yet.
We're going to speed
Not
run the
yet.
noise complaint here.
They're gonna
in a
be
minute.
like, they're gonna be calling up front, talking about there's some guy yelling yeehaw as loud as he can at 12 o'clock at night. What's going on in that apartment?
Wait, hang on, Matthew. Something's breaking in.
Yes.
But anyways, also Vermont, I might be a little bit wrong with that. I think I may be remembering that story incorrectly there for a second. But can you reread that one again real quick, Matthew?
Yes. P.S. Felt like Snoopy and Red Baron in biplane, straight into heaven, free falling, loops and upside down, goggles and scarf.
And thank you so much once again for the support. And also pretty funny comment. Unfortunately, I don't know what that was in context of, but still a pretty good one nonetheless. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next we have a $3 super chat from Fuzz the Cat, who says, "Just for the laughs, could we please have one live stream where the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt swap roles? Matt hosts, NTE does the chats etc. Pretty please."
Oh, I hate to say this, and I think Matthew would have to agree. We feasibly cannot do that because Matthew does not have the knowledge of the war and things surrounding it to cover that well, and I also don't have the sewing machine down pat that Matthew has to keep everything running behind the scenes. We're almost like irreplaceable cogs in this machine that we pretty much made the stream into. We can't really interchange the parts from one piece of the machine to the next because then the whole thing will fall apart. I don't know if you can agree with that, Matthew, but you can add in your 2 bits here if you want.
Sounds fine to me.
So we would do that if it was possible, but sadly, we would be so poorly placed in both of our roles that the whole thing would fall apart most likely within minutes. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for an interesting idea. It's a cool idea, but sadly, I just don't think it's possible. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Sausage Gravy Biscuit, who says, "Shooting for the last super chat from your favorite breakfast food, Slava Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, Sausage Gravy Biscuit. Sausage Gravy Biscuits are one of my favorite breakfast foods. I love them, and you can't get over the taste of them. They're delicious. If you've never had one, come to the South and have one. You will love them. And of course, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also trying to be the last super chat, but I'm not sure if you are or aren't. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next we have a $3 super chat from Karn of Talonhawk once more, who says, "For this old Aussie, answer a chat question for me and my Ridgeback ex-Raj."
And thank you so much once again for the support. I beg of you, you're making me feel terrible. Please do not send in another super chat. I'm being quite serious here. I do not want you to be in a financial hardship because of this channel. But with that, we will answer the live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the question goes to Book Bandit, who says, "Have you seen the news that 2 Iranian military commanders who are supplying Russia with drones have been assassinated?"
No, I didn't. I'll have to look into that news because that happened. That's bizarre. But I have not heard of that. And so with that, I hope we address that live chat question fairly well. It's a really short answer, really just because of lack of information on my end, but I will look into it and try and see if that is true or not. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again, Karna, for sponsoring a live chat, but please do not send in another. I beg of you. You're making me feel terrible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Dubsy Dabster as well as EJ Esposito. Thank you very much to you both for your donations, but without comments. So sadly, there's nothing to address, but thank you very much for that generosity. We also have a $2 super chat from Raphael Harris, who says, "Slava LSA." With that being said, on to Donet's question. Oh man, that was good.
Man.
That was good.
That was genius. I love that one. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next we have a super chat from the entire family: Billy, Joe, Carl, Bob, Danny, and Frank, who says, "Tank pull flawed. S-tank missing. Me."
I'm sorry. I know it's a cool tank. But sadly, we can't throw them all, and we only have 4 options. We had to go with the mainstream ones, although the Type 10 really isn't. But with that, I thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, "That's a mine plow on the M1.
And thank you for the support. I'm glad that someone was able to clarify that. I forgot what it was, but that is a mind plow. And now that you made me pull memories out of the deep recesses of my head from years ago, it is a mind plow. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one. But of course, thank you, Craig, for being a longtime veteran of the Lee Spring Army, an old guard member, as they say.
All right, and up next, we have a $1 super chat from Carniv Talonhawk for the final super chat of the night, who says, doing it for the ones who can't. Don't worry, guys.
Oh, thank you again. But please do not send in another. I thank you so much. But I've said this like each time you've sent one in. But I beg of you, if it's going to put you in financial straits, I'd rather you not. I would rather you just enjoy the stream and just hang out than put yourself in any kind of hardship supporting us. But thank you so much once again. And I believe that is the last one of the night, if I'm correct, Matthew.
And it is.
All right, and so with that, we are starting to run a little bit overtime. We are trying to curtail the length of these streams a little bit, and so we're going to be answering live chat questions for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to have to make sure the answers are a little bit short and quickly given, so that way we can try and get to as many of them as we can. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a question from Tasman006, who says, have you guys seen the latest pictures of Putin? His hand is a bit black. They think it's medical infusions from cancer. The queen before her death had the same thing.
I have not seen that, but I would not doubt that whatsoever, and we will try and find the pictures and look at them with a fine-tooth comb to see if that is good or not. And so with that, well, if that is real or not. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a question from Justin, who says, where do you think the Russians will fall back to once they are pushed out of Kherson?
The Russians, once they're pushed out of Kherson, will fall back across the other side of the Dnieper River. This is the only natural defensive barrier that they have in between them and the Ukrainians. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Dale Elaticus, who says, if Putin dies, how do you see Russia backing out of the conflict?
If Putin died, the next successor would take charge. There would have to be a decision made whether they follow Putin's legacy or whether they carve a new path for Russia. They would most likely choose to carve a new path for Russia and end the war and step back out of the war as a bit of a savior of Russia, helping out the Russian people and making sure that they don't continue to die in a senseless war. And so that's where I'm seeing it going for the most part in a nutshell. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Von Dalen, who says, Enforcer, what about MH17? Russia actually attacked an airplane full of NATO citizens in 2014.
That is true. They did, I believe it was a Malaysian flight that was flying over Ukraine. Malaysia Air always has the worst history with being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was one of those instances. Well, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I think it may have been a Dutch Air aircraft that was shot down. I'm not exactly sure. But it was shot down. It was not over Ukrainian territory. It almost got us involved in the Ukraine conflict in a way, because at that point, the Russians said that they were not in Ukraine. But in the end, we kind of decided not to for one reason or another. But a lot of, I believe, NATO citizens did die on that aircraft, and you are correct. I would actually have to go back and look at the history of that a little bit more to get a very well put together and well tailored answer to that question. But right now, I think that's about the best I can do. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from Rick P., who says, do you think Ukraine should stop destroying the Russian flags and just use them as toilet paper instead?
Really, honestly, as long as they're using them like garbage, I'm fine with however they're being used. If they're using them to clean their feet, wipe their butts, use them as handkerchiefs, it doesn't matter to me. As long as they're just treating the Russian flag like garbage, that's all that counts. And excuse me real quick. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And also, if it is toilet paper, good for them. Keep it up. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And I almost forgot, but our decoders of the stream, Mark Hodges, C-Fay, and also the newcomer, Draconiate, have figured out the Morse code. They say, riddle me this, Batman. What is an army that exists in thin air? The Russians after being bombed. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you for deciphering it. Ding, 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 ding. You did get it correct. That was the Morse code message. And so with that, I thank y'all so much for continuing to decipher those Morse code messages day in and day out. I hope y'all been enjoying the messages so far. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. Also, Sally Lose, real quick, said, I really do love your rabbit holes, but if it makes you cut live chat questions to just 5 minutes, I vote to lose at least 5 minutes of the rabbit holes to get 10 minutes for the live chat questions. I would agree, but I hope you do see that sometimes the rabbit holes are just so enticing and so interesting that we kind of get engrossed in them a little bit, and so sadly the time is lost. But we are trying to curtail rabbit holes and everything in the meantime to try and make them a little bit shorter, but we're still failing at that miserably. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
Viewer is Kim, Clem, who says, what is the Russian capacity in space weapon-wise?
The Russian capacity in space weapon-wise is non-existent, especially because of the sanctions. Roscosmos has not been able to operate at all, and for that reason, they do not really have any kind of weapon capabilities in space. However, they are the only country on Earth that did have a automatic gun attached to one of their spacecraft. Russian spacecraft with a gun. The Salyut 3, called a civilian station, it had a self-defense gun, which had been used to design for use aboard the station. And let me see if I can find you all a picture of this thing here. Not that one, not that one, not that one, dang it. We're looking for the one that's attached to the outside of the freaking station. Here we go. This is it right here, the R-23M. This is a digital representation of it, but this thing is on the outside of one of the space stations. It can be used to dislodge debris and can also be used to attack incoming spacecraft. Why did they put that on the space station? No one really knows, because it practically turned out to be useless. It also caused a lot of vibrations whenever it was fired, which caused a lot of damage to the stations and modules that it was attached to, but they did have one. So that's really their only weapons capability in space, is this, if they even have one out there anymore, that's usable. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover this news with all of y'all, and I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight's news. And if y'all have, make sure to hit the like button on the stream. We've gotten up to 2,888 likes. Do y'all think we can get it up to 3,000 before the end of the stream? Maybe. And of course, please make sure to subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week, except for 10 p.m. Eastern time. Well, no, we run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern time. The only time we do not run these streams is the Monday of every single week. We take those days off, but we will be having 2 videos coming out this upcoming Monday on October 31st. One will be a Halloween special. The other one will be Matthew's upcoming video that has been highly anticipated. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching this channel, and thank you for helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine on day 248. Good night, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you then.
Вічно слава Єлисім, слава Україні!
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття за